Good evening. I'd like to reconvene the public session. We'll have a report of actions taken in closed session.
Yes, the City Council discussed the matters listed on the agenda in closed session, and there are no reportable actions.
Thank you. We will now have the Pledge of Allegiance led by Mayor Pro Tem Robin Grunmeyer and the invocation by Jeff Cahan. Please rise.
Join me in a salute to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Evening, Jeff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for this honor. Would everybody please join me as we go before the Lord? Heavenly Father, Lord, we just thank you for this evening, that we can gather together in a free country, in a great city, that we can gather together to discuss the items that are before us, the issues that impact us as residents, and that we can have our voices heard, and that we have our friends and fellow residents on council and commissions and other important positions to make decisions that help to run our city. We just ask you, Lord, tonight that you would bless this meeting, bless all those that are here, that are watching and listening, that you would just guide the discussion, that you would allow all the speakers to be able to get their points across, and for the council to be able to listen and make wise decisions. We just again thank you, Lord, for our freedoms and the ability to gather and peaceably assemble. And we just thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Okay, we'll now move into City Council report on regional boards.
So on January 24th, we had the City Schools Committee meeting. We were happy to have Karen Roper do a presentation on our homeless solutions and inform the school district of what programs we have and how we might be able to better collaborate and make sure that the services are available to all residents of Norco. And for me personally, it's about getting the word out that the program exists and their services, so that folks don't feel like they need to know somebody to get services, that it's just a program that's well known and people know to reach out to the city if there is a need. We also talked about some issues in front of Washington Elementary School with traffic and unsafe driving. The school district has already followed up on some of those items from that meeting, so I'm looking forward to some positive resolutions with that as well. And then Day of the Cowboy Committee meeting on the 31st. Oh, yes, and then at the last meeting under discussion, I did mention that there's a critical blood shortage in the county right now. It's probably the worst it's ever been. Norco High School is hosting a blood drive on Wednesday, February 9th from 8:30 to 1:30. And this would be kind of like a twofer. You would donate blood and it would go to LifeStream. So it stays in Riverside County and they tell you exactly where your blood goes and who you've helped and how many people you've helped. The additional benefit of doing it at Norco High School is there is some monetary donations given back to the school based on how much blood they can get donated at their specific drive. So you're helping Norco High School and you're helping Riverside County with blood donations. So if you have time, it's going to be in a mobile blood van over by the gym.
On January 20th, I attended the Northwest Mosquito and Vector Control District meeting, and there are no updates from that. Thank you.
Actually, what I'm going to talk about a little bit is tomorrow we have arranged to meet with a representative for the West Coast for the keeper of the National Register, and we're real excited about that. A lot of people don't know that the state of California supported a nomination in 2018 to place and expand the Naval Hospital, the old Naval Hospital and Navy base, on the National Register of Historic Places. We then waited almost 2 years for the Navy to weigh in. What we didn't know is that secretly they met with the keeper of the National Register and essentially said that Norco was lying about all of it. So we spent a year rebutting their 18 pages, and we finally just said we've had enough. SHPO is actually being very hard on the Navy right now. They're not getting anything through because she believes in our position. That's the State Historic Preservation Officer. So I finally contacted the West Coast representative, and he has immediately agreed to meet with us. So Bill Wolkman, myself, and Andy Okoro will be setting the record straight. It'll only be the second time in 12 years that we've been able to have a face-to-face meeting with somebody. The last time we had a face-to-face with the Navy was in front of the Historic Commission, and Bill Wolkman smoked them. They absolutely could not defend their argument, which is just as bogus as it can be. So anyway, I'm very excited about that. We'll see what happens. That's all I have. Thank you.
I attended the Riverside County Transportation Commission Projects Programs meeting along with the directors meeting. And just to let people know, the nighttime westbound 91 lanes will be closed Thursday evening of this week. And the eastbound lanes, 91 express lanes, will be closed Friday so they can upgrade and update the construction area. And then if you travel outside the area, you're going to be on Highway 60 through the Badlands. Just be advised this weekend there'll be lane closures out there too, so you're going to delay you going through. They're going to take it down to one lane on each side. Also went to the LAFCO, not much coming out of there for us locally. And then the One Watershed, which is part of the SAPWA program, that they're starting to take applications for Proposition 1 money. That's what you guys voted on several years ago. And that helps out to a lot of the use of reclaimed water. Flooding helps out with a variety of reclamation projects. So this is a good thing throughout the state. And in our area where we call the Riverside, Orange County, and San Bernardino, as part of the Santa Ana River water project, we get, I think it's $18 million out of that. So that's a good thing. And also with that, SAPWA, and this is an interesting thing, and they're starting this 4 to 5 year project study on doing cloud seeding. No, they're not going to do it all over. They're not going to have the rainmaker come down. What they're going to do is they're going to work through the mountain area. They hopefully will get a 7% increase in rainfall for us a year. For most of you don't realize, we are well below our normal rainfall, and we have been for the last 3 to 4 years. We should be getting 12 inches of rain a year, and we haven't been getting it. It all comes at one time in our year, so the rest of the year. So hopefully this, and it's not going to be that much, but even a 7 to 8% increase in rainfall a year will be a big benefit to our area, especially to replenish the basins. Then July 23rd, mark it on your calendar, is our National Day of the American Cowboy event. We're going to have a rodeo up there on that evening. A lot of fun, kind of like we did last year, but even bigger and better. And then RTA, they're celebrating their 45 years. In 1977, RTA started. Cost you $0.25 to ride the bus. This year, starting March, it'll cost you $0.25 to ride the bus. So that's a good deal. Also, we approved the big $12 million Vine Street in Riverside, the bus transit complex there. It's going to be big, and that's going to tie in all the transit agencies from San Bernardino, all the surrounding cities, Orange County, LA. That'll go there, and then they'll be able to get out. It's a mass transit thing, so hopefully in the future kids can jump on a bus and go all the way to LA or ride the train, but it's all going to go out, all connected. And so this project has been in the works for over 10 years, and it's finally going to come to fruition, so that's a good thing. And that's it.
Nothing to report. So we'll move on to our consent calendar. Dana, do we have any cards?
I have no speaker cards, but I will read that all items listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine and may be enacted by one motion. Prior to the motion to consider any action by the presiding governmental body, any public comments on any of the consent items will be heard. There will be no separate action unless members of the governmental body or the audience request specific items to be removed from the consent calendar. Items removed from the consent calendar will be separately considered under item 3 of the agenda. And like I said, there's no public comment cards for this.
Thank you. Do any members wish to pull any items? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Please vote. Motion passes unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move into public comments.
I have no general public comments tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move into legislative matters. We'll move into legislative matters. Item 5A is ordinance number 1079 for second reading. For a motion? If not,
You just need a motion.
I'll make a motion to adopt ordinance number 1079 for second reading and adopt resolution number 2022-09.
Second.
Please vote.
Well, let's see.
Motion passes unanimous.
Okay, moving into discussion action items. What I'd like to do is reverse item 6C and 6B. So we'll hear our 6A, the report on our fiscal year first, and then go to item 6C. No,
Okay.
no. And Dana, do you want to do the order of presentation first, please?
Order of presentation for this evening for discussion action items is number 1, staff report presentation; 2, council questions of staff; 3, public comment; 4, council discussion and action. There you go.
Good evening, Lisette.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. We're here to present the fiscal year 2021 audited financial reports. The reports include the city's annual comprehensive financial report and other related reports, which also includes our Measure R financial statements. Our city independent auditors, Clifton Larson Allen LLP, have completed the year-end annual independent audit for the fiscal year 2021. I would like to note that the Measure R financial statements were presented to the Measure R committee on January 26, 2022, and they approved to move forward to City Council for review and approval as well. I do have our auditor's partner, Mr. Nitin Patel, that will be taking over the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisette. Again, my name is Nitin Patel, and I'm a principal with Clifton Larson Allen, and I'm here today to present the annual audit of the financial statements and the 2021 audit results. Next slide, please. The scope of our services for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2021 included an audit of the financial statements, which is contained in your annual comprehensive financial report. We also completed an audit of Measure R transaction and use tax fund financial statements. We were engaged to do a single audit of federal grant programs if expenditures exceeded $750,000, but we will not be doing that because we did not meet that threshold. We also completed an agreed upon procedures review of the GAN appropriation limit. We prepared the city's annual financial transactions report, And finally, in addition to the audit, we also prepared the annual comprehensive financial report. So the objectives of a financial statement audit. First one, management is responsible for the preparation and fair presentation of the city's financial statements and the relevant internal controls over financial reporting. In other words, the systems that are set up to provide accurate financial reporting are management's responsibility. The auditor's responsibility is to express opinions on these financial statements based on their audit. And we have issued an unmodified opinion. CLA expresses an unmodified opinion which effectively states that your financial statements are fairly presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. Next slide, please. Certain required communications that we needed to make to you are, first, difficulties in performing the audit. There were none. We did not have any disagreements with management. There were no material misstatements corrected that we proposed. There were no uncorrected misstatements. Material weaknesses identified, there were none, and there were no material non-compliance identified in the audit. Next, please. The accounting policies adopted during the year included GASB Statement 84, which effectively was the implementation of fiduciary activities. A future significant standard is going to be GASB Statement number 87 on leases, which is applicable for next year. Also, we're not aware that or did not note any transactions for where there was a lack of guidance on how specifically to report that. Okay. Significant accounting estimates which were evaluated for reasonableness were the employer required contributions, pension expense, the net pension liability, and corresponding deferred inflows and outflows for the city's defined benefit pension plans. Effectively, that's the CalPERS retirement plan. Also, the employer required contributions and related OPEB items, including the OPEB liability for the other post-employment benefit plan. Certain other matters that we needed to communicate to you is there is required supplementary information in your annual comprehensive financial report, which was not audited. However, we did perform limited procedures, which primarily we were looking for consistency within the report, that there were no inaccuracies. We also audited the supplementary information, which was compared and reconciled to the underlying records used to prepare the financial statements. And finally, your annual comprehensive financial report also included an introductory and statistical section, but which were not audited, and that's very standard in producing these annual comprehensive financial report. And that concludes my comments, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Do we have any questions of staff?
I have one, Mr. Mayor. And it's not at the auditor, but Lizette, maybe you can help me out and understand this. I'm looking at your Measure R transaction and use tax funds. And on page 9, I see the actual at 9.9 million, and then the variance with final budget with a positive is 6.0. Can you explain why one's different than the other?
Let me go grab the report.
Okay, all right. It's a supplement. It's the Measure R supplement.
So to understand your question, the actual ending fund balance of 9.9
Yes.
million, and what we had originally comparing to the final amended budget.
Okay, but one is the 9.9. I'm just trying to understand the 6 million figure next to it.
So the fund balance is a carryover since the inception of Measure R implementation. What we currently, our budget is for our resources and our charges during the current year. With our fund balance includes a 4.9 that was a result from the prior years. And then the activity in the current fiscal year included that our revenues were actuals at 6.9 compared to what we had estimated at 5.7. So that revenue increased our fund balance for 1.1. And as for expenditures, we had budgeted that we were going to spend 6.8 million. But our actual expenditures with the Measure R was actually only 1.9. So that is where the big variance exists, resulting in the variance of 4.9. When you add the difference between those two, that is a net effect of the 6 million.
Okay, okay, so it's just a difference in, all right, thank you. That explains it. Thank you.
Robin? Catherine? Kevin? So page 21, statement of net position. That I think.
report?
Pardon?
Which report? I'm sorry.
Big book.
Okay. One sec.
Oh, you don't really have to grab it if you don't want to. It's more of 21. I think just to compliment you and Andy, I think this is, right now, I think it's the best we've ever had it. If I recall correctly, right now we're showing assets of a little over $368 million, liabilities of $86 million, and a net position of $286 million. I think it's both of yours and all your staff's work.
Thank you. I know.
I think this is
it
the best
includes
number
everything.
I've ever seen. Yeah, I thought so. So, appreciate all your hard work.
Well, thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
I want to echo that. You know, again, I can remember when it didn't look this good, and I really appreciate the work of you, Andy, and your staff. The idea that a city the size of Norco can have these kinds of assets and can be this fiscally sound is actually almost unbelievable. So thank you very much.
I think the other thing that I would like to do is thank the residents too for the passage of Measure R. And in the report, it talks about how in its second full year, so we're only in the second full year, it's generated $6.9 million for infrastructure and city services. So thank you to the residents for believing in council and believing in staff to help improve Norco as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, with that, we recommend if you receive and file our audited financial statements.
Thank you, Lisette. Entertain a motion? No. Motion to receive and file. Thank you.
Motion passes unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. Okay, we'll shift gears a little bit to item 6C. And what this was is this was a request by Councilmember Bash to have a discussion on trail standards and rehabilitation. And we're going to kind of start that with our Public Works Director, but we will then have a conversation about any specific roads or questions that the audience may have, and then comments on that. So, Chad?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you indicated, this was a request from Councilman Bash to bring back just a general discussion, one about the trail standards and generally how staff applies our various projects, because we have numerous trail improvement projects out there, and there's certainly a difference in the trail standard, which is normally done if we have optimal space for new projects. We want ultimate right-of-way, which in our trail standard, which we provided to council in the agenda item, is 6 feet. And that's intended to be for where utilities would normally go, trees, water meters, etc. And that's in the optimal scenario. And then we still have 12 feet of trail clear space. And obviously that's what we'd optimally like to have as a standard. Realistically, most of Norco, especially on the east side of town, wasn't built that way at all. It's pretty narrow when it comes to most of the trails and parkways. They're actually just a blend of trail/parkway. You're not sure where one ends and one begins, but as part of our project, as we start adding more trail fencing, we pretty much are defining where the parkway is versus the trail, and every street is different. And when we evaluate those projects, especially now that we have the ongoing service from Nova, our trail maintenance company, now we have somebody that can go in as we remove fencing, can go ahead and groom the trail again, and also work with us to widen it in areas in order to establish the appropriate parkway that we can. In those areas where we are establishing trail, we're looking at encroachments, what encroachments can be removed relatively easily, which ones are pretty much permanent fixtures, like have pilasters and walls and things. We can move fencing back, that's chain link, or we can move grass that's encroached and try to get that space back to, again, the purpose is to widen the trail, but also to establish the parkway a little bit better, because a lot of our trails, the parkway might be a foot off the road edge, maybe 2. We're trying to at least get a minimum of 3, because at least with 3, you can plant trees. You can fit trees along there, and again, that's one of the issues we've had with the trails, is that we have removed a lot of trees in the trails that were in the trail on the parkways, and we at least want to, as we go through and do projects, make the space, if someday either a resident wants to place a tree, if the city develops a program where we might put trees in the parkway and dedicated watering, at least the space is there already established as we do a project. And the other reason that moving it back farther is it also helps us with vehicles as they're driving. Sometimes when they're too close, and a lot of our streets are dark, folks miss and may hit the fencing, or even also when people are backing out of their own properties. A couple extra feet may help them when they're backing out trailers, maybe not hit the fencing. It's just a lot of different reasons, trying to create buffers, etc. But it's always a custom thing we do on every street, because every street is literally different. But that's the way we take the approach on how we identify trails, how we're going to set them up, and even also when we're going to establish a new trail, we're looking at that, trying to figure out what space do we have. We want to put the fencing in. We want to make sure that's there, that helps define the trail and provides that visual buffer. But at the same time, we won't have the full 12 feet of trail and 6 feet of parkway. We may end up doing 3 feet of parkway, and it might be 10 foot of trail. Everything's a little bit different. Sometimes it'll go in and out based off of the encroachments that are there. So we take a hands-on approach, especially myself, in talking with residents to see what we can do to remove some of the encroachments, how we can facilitate that. Many of them we do help either move those encroachments or pay to get them removed, depending on what they are and how easy it is. But we try to be proactive in that process and not ignore what is obviously there. And so that's the general methodology that we use in applying our standard. In most cases, the standard honestly never applies, because the space in that 18 feet is almost rarely there. So we're always shrinking it between the trail and the parkway to establish at least some measurable parkway and some measurable trail. But each street is different. And I just want to give that brief overview as far as how staff approaches a project in doing that. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have regarding any of our current projects that we have going on in relation to applying the improvements to the trails.
Thank you, Chad. Kevin?
So what prompted this is that Norco initially, especially the eastern side, old Norco, was planted with trees along the property lines. And we had the perfect storm. We had the aging out of trees planted there in the 30s, and the pepper trees died out, and we had the leucopsilus hit all of the eucalyptus trees. And what has happened is we've now made a shift from trees along property lines to the street. And we never approved that. And so I need to make sure that if that's what we're going to do, that's the official line, that we're going to create parkways and trees next to the street. I'd like that to be calcified by council, because that's a real abrupt change. What's happening is that people who have, I go back to when, truthfully, we owned to the middle of the street. And if the trail goes away, we get to take the street back. I don't know if you can really do that, but that was the deal. We were here when that all happened. So the other part of the perfect storm is that residents no longer want to plant trees. And so, as we know, we have a lot of free trees out there, and they didn't want to run the irrigation. So the idea that we're now going to run irrigation underneath the trail to trees along the street, I just don't think it's going to work. And so we've started this plan, which basically we're reconfiguring our trails. I'm not against it, but it's creating all kinds of havoc with how people have generally used the fronts of their properties. Now, there's a lot of other issues. You're not allowed to, perpendicular park in front of your place. I mean, there's all those things you're not allowed to do, and that's been codified for years. But I think we as a council need to understand that we are making a huge change. And if that's the decision, I'm glad to hear it, probably from experience, that Chad is trying to work with people because it's so different. I mean, I've even heard the whole reason we're doing it, this is because there's somebody on California who's politically connected and we don't want to remove her trees. And it's like, that's not true. It's a trash tree. And there are some trash trees out there. So, and I think the discussion following this is indicative of somewhat of what I'm talking about. So I think we as a council need to say, okay, this is the direction we're going now. Now again, it's a perfect storm because Edison destroyed the trees underneath the lines, and we have lost so many trees simply because they've aged out. So is our decision that we are now going to work to move the trees to the street edge as opposed to where they've been? As you know, I planted trees right where they were for 80 years, and I moved them back, just to set an example. But the idea now is we're going to have room on Pedley Avenue to plant trees along the road, and I don't think there's enough room, and I don't think Norco's ever going to be able to run the irrigation themselves to make that happen. Our best bet is that people probably buy their properties will water those trees. I don't know the answer to this. I mean, I know Chad's really trying to work with people, but it's a huge change we've undertaken that I don't think really ever realized it was being made. And that's all I have.
Robin?
So, Chad, I have a question for you because I'm in a similar situation to Councilman Bash. The property that I'm at, we lost 6 trees because they were along the fence line. And so now there's nothing. It's aged out, Edison, a combination of all those factors. But losing 6 trees on one property line is a huge impact. And I think of when you used to drive through town, every street you went down, it was tree lined. And now we are bare to a certain, in my opinion, it looks terrible from that respect of all the trees that we've lost. So, thinking about, well, we have all these trees, the way the standards are, and it speaks to what Kevin says, the way the standards are right now, the property I'm at is ineligible for trees because there's not enough room in the parkway. My question to you, as we're developing these parkways and potentially putting trees, my first thought is how many years is it going to be before those trees are impacting the roads that we've spent millions of dollars on and popping up the roads? Or is it, on your tree list, do they only get trees that won't potentially do that?
Sure.
Right.
I guess the easy direct answer is look up in the hills. So the hills are not to the standard that it is now where it's 12 feet and 6 feet.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically a 3-foot parkway that you see most of as you're going up the hills. That's what's been designed, and it's loaded with trees. And again, it's all about picking the right tree for that right area. Obviously, we're not picking eucalyptus. We're not picking any of the pepper trees. We purposely chose trees in part of our planning palette for the free trees or even the trees that we have in our approved list. It's always about picking the right tree. And so that's the example I would give, and that's what we've been following as far as if we at least establish a parkway. Because as Councilman Best talks about, unfortunately, it is a perfect storm. We're also dealing with trails were placed where they could be placed, and most of the community on the east side of town had them along their private property line when they established the parkway, and it was quote quote in the trail. And riders get used to going around the trees and in the middle, etc. Unfortunately, a lot of our trees either aged out or they diseased out or they were killed basically by Edison's practices, and it's very bare. What I'm trying to at least establish, and I'm going to use the River Road project as an example. Council's purposely established we want trees along that parkway. It's basically going to be a 3 foot to 3.5, 4 foot parkway to plant trees, and there'll be 83 trees along there. So that's an example of what we could do. It's a long-term discussion. It's a big one, but we're basically building an infrastructure of planting, putting water there, an irrigation controller, meter, and we're planting trees. We're going to maintain that. So you're going to have that's the example of what we could do, but it's a long-term decision. But if I don't establish that now as we do projects, that will never happen because there won't be enough space. And in talking with WCA, in their opinion, if you give them 3 feet, they can plant trees. They're not going to be the giant tall ones because those are the ones that have the larger root structure, but it is trees. They'll have shades. And again, the example are the trees that are up in the hills and what's planted there and how they're maintained, are they unsightly? Are they just still provide shade? I mean, it seems fairly dense in certain areas. It seems to work pretty well. So I think you could accomplish a lot with 3 feet, but it is going to be a bigger discussion amongst the council of, do we want to invest time and money to develop established parkways that have city-generated irrigation that we maintain and we provide for city trees? And that's just that discussion, really. At some point we need to have.
Right. That's the only question.
Catherine? Ted?
Okay, Charity Boy. And let's just pick on Pedley between 5th and 6th. I won't let you down there. We just put the white trail fence in there. How long ago, Kevin, was that new trail fence put in, the wooden one, when they did the flood control project? Less than 7 years ago? 8 years ago?
2010.
Yeah, 10 years ago. That trail fence, the wooden trail fence, was almost on the edge of the road. It was literally destroyed. It was too close. So I understand why you want to do the parkway. It is. You got to get them away from the edge of the street. And then I'll go back and I look at 5th Street, where we have the trail fence. And we got the big eucalyptus trees. Nobody's hitting that trail fence along 5th Street. Because if they do, they're going to hit the eucalyptus tree first. I'm not a big fan of eucalyptus trees because I know what they do to the road and they have their own set of problems. So then I look at the hills. I have probably 3 feet of parkway in front of my house. I have 3 Chinese pistache sitting up growing. Nice shade trees growing. They're not rooting out. They're not tearing anything up. The good thing about them is they're protecting that trail fence, that white trail fence, the white vinyl. The good thing about the trees, and when you look at the trees and the white trail fence both together, they're actually causing, whether you want it to or not, a traffic calming measure. Because what it does is it restricts the visual restriction as you go through. Robin's right. You go down off of Temescal, zoom, they go through. Because there's no trees to create that. We need the trees.
Right.
We need the trees on the parkway to do 2 things. One, to get that visual restriction effect that you get. It's totally visual, but it works. It also works protecting that trail fence so the vinyl doesn't, so they don't shatter it when they hit it. The problem I see, and we'll go back to the hills, and I know it's an LMD thing. Most of the people in the hills in the front part, the parkway, they water those themselves in most of the LMDs. I think 2 is the only one that doesn't. The problem that they have is the property on the side of their, where on the side, that doesn't get taken care of or watered, even though it's the resident's responsibility. That's where we should be implementing who waters it. Is it the city's responsibility to set these watering up? And then we're going to end up, and Kevin's right, we're going to end up with, every meter, the cost of the meters, the water, and everything else. So what is that? When you're thinking about that, if you're going to put in, if we as a city are going to irrigate these trees that we're going to put in these parkways, and especially in these old towns, what are we talking about as cost of those meters and lines?
Well, I mean, obviously there's going to be a decent cost to it, but it's an investment on what you're trying trying to build that's gonna, and again, you only have to water for a certain amount of period. Once a tree is established, it pretty much will survive if you put in the right type. So a lot of this would be you're watering it, putting in infrastructure for a certain amount of time, maybe a 5-year period, and then you can almost turn off the water, if not entirely, and they would survive on their own for the most part. Cost-wise, I again, a guesstimate for a new 1-inch or 2-inch water meter, depending on the length you're watering or where it is, you're probably talking about, especially if staff was doing it, maybe $15,000 for the water meter and the service and everything else, and then you'd have to build in all the lateral, all the irrigation controller to manage that, etc. That would probably be another, depending on the distance, $10,000 to $15,000. So it per street.
Per street. So how many streets are you talking about?
So, for example, because you mentioned Pedley, if we wanted to, and again, because we already have this example we're doing on River Road, if you want to do that same example, and that would be the only reason, and again, why I'm trying to facilitate parkways, is that it at least gives us a chance to do something, whether it's the resident who wants trees, or if the city wants to generate a program, because obviously between 5th and 6th, that street has been decimated. There's almost no trees anymore. Between Hillside, same thing, 5th and 6th, it's been decimated. There's almost no trees. By at least facilitating the parkways, we're giving ourselves a chance to have the actual discussion. We don't have to finish now, but we can have it later about, do we want to put any funding forward to establish trees for a certain time period with the intent that they should be able to survive on their own after a certain period. And then that asset, we don't have to pay for the water anymore at that point. But we already have WCA or whoever our vendor might be at that time who maintains these trees. We'll take care of them, we'll trim them, we'll stake them, put supplements, etc., because that's part of the requirements that we would have. So it's going to be an investment if that's something the city decides to do because they want to bring those trees back, because there's no one else is going to bring them to us. We've already seen that there's not a lot of desire by the residents to do it at this point. But also some of the folks have been unable to do it because they don't have enough parkway. Because as it currently is, they see a fence that's a foot off the road, they can't do it. But if we determine that might be able to move it back because we're reestablishing the trail, we're cleaning it up a little bit, that might make it viable to do that. But like I said, I just want to make sure I was explaining the goals of putting out the parkway rather than keeping it next to the edge. It's not to try to take property from somebody else. It's really just trying to best provide the future of, if we want to do something on our own, we can then do it because we did it when we did the original project, and we're not having to redo everything again and move fences. It's really just establishing that parkway that I think is critical to do.
Just answer Chris real quick. On North, when we put the trail fence in there and we put the trees in there, how wide is that between the street and the trail? Is that 3 or is that a little wider?
In the trail and the parkway?
On the trail, because
it's probably about 3 feet.
3 feet.
It's not very wide. Maybe 4, but it's not very wide.
Okay, and that's where we end up putting those Canary Island pines, right? Something like that.
I think those Chinese pistache. I think.
Nope.
No, we put
Canary
those are
Island
pines, and then the pistache
are in the inside, in the interior, in the medium, and that medium is what we put water in to do that. The same thing is to finish off the island,
right,
to do the calming effect to get that
in that
restriction.
scenario, we put in the water that feeds both the parkway and the median.
Okay.
That was an example of a choice. Again, we chose to plant trees, and we're providing water to that.
Okay. All right, that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Catherine?
For the trails that have been rehabbed, Chad, would you say most or all of them have a 3-foot parkway now? Or space for a tree?
Pretty darn close. Yeah, 3 feet or more, I would say, in most. When you say rehabbed, it's the ones where we've actually redone the trail fencing.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
I would say yes on those. It's probably at least 3 feet in most cases.
Okay. And then my other question is, could you just refresh memories and revise, what were the watering requirements for the free tree program?
The final one was basically the council adopted was that the resident has to provide watering to the trees if they want it.
So
initially, we tried we implemented in that program that we would water trees to get them interested. Ultimately, I think there was about 30 to 40 people that we grandfathered in and allowed them. We would provide that service because they originally wanted a tree. but everybody else that asked, one who originally said they had water, is obligated to water the tree.
So could someone, if they had a 3-foot parkway, could they have gotten a tree for that parkway, even if there wasn't an irrigation line there, but they committed to watering it?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
We're asking for a dedicated irrigation to make sure it got watered, but again, at this point, I think we take a chance on anything, and hopefully it stays.
But before,
stays
so
alive.
before technically they could have been
Wanted
told no.
something that was fixed, yeah.
They
But,
needed, yeah. So that did exclude parkway trees for most residents.
because there wasn't dedicated irrigation? No. If you said that you would put it in, then you could get a tree.
Okay.
It was simply, do you want a tree, or
Okay.
do you have existing irrigation? No. Are you willing to put it in? Yes. Then they were eligible for a tree, and that's the way the survey went. Again, we were just trying
That's
to
a
make
little
sure they're
harder than
committed.
just running your hose, though. So that might have been a
We weren't-
barrier for some.
Yeah, we weren't considering that as part of that. We wanted more of a dedicated
Yeah.
thing, but at this point, I think if they're willing to do it and keep up with it, we'll take a hose.
Yeah.
We'll take a bucket, whatever you want to do.
Okay. Thank you.
But that also changed to, we're providing watering the trees also.
Only for the ones that we, in part of our secondary, we did an initial survey where you're required to water. We got very little activity. Then we tried a proposal, if we provided the water for at least 1 year, would you take a tree and put a tree in? We got a little bit of activity off of that, not very much. And ultimately, when the council approved the program, the requirement was we only want to put trees where there's dedicated watering. In all other areas, but you will honor what we told those residents, that we would provide watering for those specific trees. That's why I said there's about 33 to 40 people that are getting or should be getting have a tree already, and we're watering it. But the other folks that agreed to do it, they are providing dedicated watering on their own.
Okay, so just a couple notes, comments that on the River Road project, that you've started pretty much with a clean slate.
Correct.
That we can determine, except for a few little areas, we can determine our setbacks, our easements, and what we have a water source there. So with that clean slate, and I think it's up, same in the hills. I mean, it started as a new development. Are the hills under CalSense controllers?
I don't know. I that would be Parks.
You know, Ted? Okay, so homeowners take care of the parkway. Like, yeah, on the hillside?
Right.
Okay.
I know
So-
they're under a controller for sure. That's,
Yeah.
That's city monitored, but I don't know what type it is.
Okay. So, and that's kind of my concern, that, like what you're talking about, Pedley Avenue, and trying to take something that's existing and turning it into like a new slate, that once you start developing that, taking that easement, putting in that water system, and those type of controllers, you're looking at an expensive ongoing cost continuously. So I think we still need to kind of massage that idea. It's not using Pedley Avenue. I mean, we don't want to turn it into a parkway, do we? Yeah. But going back to the, what we've all learned over the years, especially in Old Town Norco, that no lot's the same. And with that comes, all the other, my fence is here, or my fence is back here. I have a tree there. I have a fire hydrant in the middle of the trail. I have a storm drain structure. So little by little, we can try to correct that. But I don't know if you're trying to ask, like, would you want to develop Pedley Avenue into like a parkway? Is that kind of what you're...
I just think we need to
long-term
decide
vision is,
that, it sounds like the decision's been made, but, I would have preferred the trees to be along the property lines. I think that it looks nicer. The reason my fence keeps getting knocked down, and I always repaired it, is because people would back into it. They were parked perpendicular, and so they would just kept backing into it. I don't know. I guess we just have to decide. Are we going to? We've already started down this path, and I am glad we've sort of lessened the idea you have to run irrigation to each tree, which I did, and
You know,
so
but the-
I don't know. Is this something? I mean, we're now on the course that we're moving all the trees to the street, and Ted makes a good point. I just want to make sure that we make the decision.
Well, in what we learned, like at California North, and I think Ted brought it up earlier, that trees along the street in that setback, it develops traffic calming. It takes away a lot of the visual, and certainly one thing we need in this town. And so if we can create that with trees, I think I'd rather see the trees in the 3-foot setback or whatever that may be. I think the other part of that is we have to be able to adjust that, go through town, whether it's 3 feet or 4 feet or less than.
Yeah, I think the bigger picture might be, is there a preference by council to leave whatever impediments are in the trail, leave them there? You know, because right now, obviously, a lot of trees are removed because they died or there are problems. And so that's unfortunately been pretty significant in what we see now. And as we do trails, we look for those types of things is, okay, and we do look especially about the trees that are along the property line, because when you plant trees on a property line, even though they're our responsibility, they have the potential to create the most liability, because if and when they fall or things happen or they're encroaching because they grow out, now we pushed in somebody's wall or fence and now I'm repairing that, or if it fell, I've got that damage. So I do think there's a benefit of having a tree along a parkway versus in the trail, but I think it's more of getting direction from council of, because we're not purposely trying to go out and kill every tree, but at the same time we're trying to provide space for the trail, because that's what I hear a lot of. The trails are crowded, they're real restricted. I know you've gotten comments on the Hillside Trail and that project we have going on there related to the street, that it's already very narrow, it's got the jail boxes in there, there's encroachments, etc. That's an example of a project where we're redoing the street. As part of redoing the street, we're taking the jail boxes out, we're putting curb and gutter in, so the water will be captured in the curb drain instead of in the trail. So we improve that and get those big monstrosities out of there, and they're in many streets have that same scenario at the same time. So we get that done, and then once the street's done, I go back and look at the trail and actually replace the trail fencing as a separate project, where that's where I engage the residents, where if we have encroachments, what size are they, how significant are they, and can we work out understanding that I'd like to move this fence back, you know, whether it's a wooden fence or a chain link fence, because we're just trying to recoup a little bit more, doesn't have to be all of it, but enough that it gives us more of a straightaway trail as best as possible for the benefit of the community. And in that, if there's trees there, big or small, would you prefer staff just leave them there and the equestrians will go in and around them? It is what it is. We want to preserve what we can. If it's not dying, if it's not diseased, leave it alone. So if that's the direction of council, I can leave them there until such time they do need to be removed, etc. But as a bigger policy is, do we want to figure out, and we don't have to decide the plan tonight, if you want me to come back with something that we can go through streets and trails and have a conversation about if we were to establish true parkways that have landscaping, because it's always a parkway, whether anything's there or not. It's, do we want to start establishing as part of rehabilitating our trees and our forests with establishing parkways, which means the city will put the trees in, the city will do the water, because you can put the infrastructure in. It's not difficult, because you're just putting irrigation in. It's putting the controller in where that's going to be. It'll be a solar controller, so it's powered that way. We don't need dedicated power from Edison, and there is maintenance obviously on it and making sure the bubblers that would go to each tree would work, etc. But you're not putting your irrigation very deep. Whether you end up putting it in the trail because that's the easiest path to trench and bore, or you're putting it in the parkway, we can look at that. For example, on the River Road one, the irrigation is going in the trail, and then it's doing laterals to every single tree. It's just every case will be different. We'll have to research every time. They won't be all the same as far as how they were created. It's just, I think, more of a desire of, is the council okay with the idea, what staff's trying to at least establish the space, so that whether it's a resident or the city wants to do something in there, they can. If that's okay, then we'll keep along that path of just trying to at least give a minimum of 3 feet if we can. And in some case, that may result in the trail width is only 6 feet because it's just narrow already in that particular area for whatever reason. So I think there's two maybe questions I think maybe need to be kind of thought about is, do you like the practice we're doing now of trying to establish parkways of more definitive and giving proper space? And is there anything you want us to do related to the existing trees that might be in the trails?
The part that I would like even better with the parkways, and maybe we just tie this into our street projects when we're going to rehab a street and we're going to put in new horse trail, we're going to put in a parkway, let's plant trees and include that.
With irrigation?
Yeah.
But again, that's
I mean,
the idea is what
I mean,
you're looking for.
It's, say on Hillside, it's a half-mile section, but maybe in that scope of work, I mean, we have plenty of free trees. So in that scope of work, put the trees in as we go along.
Right.
And tie it in with the street projects.
Yeah, with the street project, or we can tie it with the trail side project and do it with that. Either one.
Yeah.
You can do that. Absolutely.
But I'm wary of the cost of those controllers, and then that just morphs into this.
Yeah. And then that's what we can bring back to you as a discussion thing.
Yeah.
Again, we can talk about it either with the streets and trails and kind of review with them, or I can bring it directly back to you to give you those costs of what we think it would be just for the basic hardware. Again, because and we already have it. I just don't have those numbers with me. Like River Road is an example. The contractor's doing it for us. What that cost will be, I can get those components, but also what it would be if we did it, if we installed the service, if we got the controller, or if we work with Nova, who can do that kind of work, who can put those controllers in, and then help maintain it afterwards. I can bring that to you, so at least you can quantify what we're talking about per block, what that means, if we were going to do that kind of program. Okay. Absolutely. And that way you have more information to really make decisions on.
Just maybe to close this out, there's always people that say, the trails, I don't have any horses, blah, 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 all that kind of thing. The reason the trails are so important, and we have to constantly remind ourselves of this, is we are the last city in the state of California by law that you can build a house on a half acre. And as of January 1st, pretty much zoning was erased in the state of California. SB 9, SB 10. So what we're really trying to do is strengthen large lots to trails to open space. Normally, to own a piece of property the size of what you have in Norco, you have to be rich. Truthfully, you have to be rich. And what we've recently done is we've put all of the A1 agricultural areas in Norco into a historic district to protect us and exempt us from SB 9 and SB 10. So this is coordinating with the fact that we're trying to make our trails even more significant in case we have to defend that particular that historic overlay. And unless you don't like elbow room, then this probably isn't the town for you. But if you don't like elbow room, then you probably are going to bridle at the trails. But the trails serve not only the equestrian aspects of the city, but it's a way of protecting against apartments in single-family neighborhoods, and it's a way of protecting our large lots. You can put 2 houses plus 2 ADUs in the back, and you can split those properties and sell each one individually. So right now, we are exempt from that. So the trails play a very, very important part in all this. So anyway, I think that I think the parkways are going in. How many people have planted trees in the parkway?
That was 200 and...
How many residents?
60?
Residents?
About
Really?
260 residents.
So I can plant trees in the parkway tomorrow?
In theory, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's all I have on that, unless there's something else.
I want to see you out there with your hose and your bucket.
Yeah.
Watering.
Well, no, I'll run a line. Yeah.
Dana, would you like to, do we have any cards?
Yes, Mayor, we have a few cards.
Okay.
The
Thank you.
first one is Susan Detillion.
Hi, Sue. You can do fine. I'm going to hold you to 3 minutes because I know how you'd like to
1
talk.
minute. I
No,
wanna
you get
thank
3.
you guys for calling me back. That was really nice. Everybody called me back, so, okay. I don't know what to start with. I just can barely do this, so what do you want to know?
Tell me why you called me.
Because you guys are trying to take away the only parking space that I have on the side of my house. I don't have a parkway, I don't have a backyard, my driveway's really small. And so I have nowhere to park my truck and trailer if you do this to me. And where it's parked, there is no easements as far as utilities or anything like that. And when we bought the house from this, oh God, here we go. I can't go on, I'm sorry. When we bought the house from the city, I was told that that was my property right there. And we moved the fence back towards my property, the chain link there. We put the chain link in to go with the line of the houses going up the street. And there was 2 really big eucalyptus trees and we took them out. And I said to Joe Shank, is this horse trail? And he said, no, this is your property right there. And I've been parking there for 20 years. And I used to park my horse trailer in my driveway, but the police department said I cannot do that anymore because the tongue of it sticks out into the horse trail. And my driveway is small. And all of this was done to my property by the city of Norco, because we bought the house from the city of Norco. So, I mean, don't do this to me now. I need that parking spot because if I lose my truck and trailer sitting there, I won't ride horses anymore. Because I won't go out on the street anymore. And I've lived here 37 years, and I've been on every street in this town hundreds of times. So I can tell you one thing about the trail system. The riders, and which I'm one, they make it happen for themselves, which is the safest way possible. If the trail's over there and it doesn't look passable safely, they'll go to the other side of the street. They just make it happen. Wherever you put these trails, I'm just telling you that's how we ride around this town. And you can get from one end of town to the other on a horse, reasonably safe. Nothing's ever happened to me, except I did have a Rottweiler take me down in the street while I was on my horse, but that's a separate issue. So, what else can I tell you? You want to know anything else?
I have a pretty good idea, but I think you've given the gist of it, and then we can add on to that. Take your time. Is there anything else that...
I don't know. I can't even think right now. I just feel like I'm shaking everywhere.
Did fine.
Okay.
You did fine.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you. Okay.
Our next speaker, Kevin Michaels.
Hi, Kevin.
My name is Kevin Michaels. I live at 798 River Drive, Norco, California. I'd like to thank you guys for taking a look at my drain that I talked about that was never fixed. And I did get a phone call saying something was going to be done. Nothing's ever been done. I still have a river that runs around my house. It has to do with trails, though. And the trail the picture I showed you, that is actually a 1970s/1980s trail photo on the north side of River Drive. That is the original trail that the city deemed the trail. Tickets have been given. Tickets have also been fought and lost because it's not quote-unquote official. That is an official 1970s, 1980s trail sign. It's in front of Sam's house, who has lived there for over 40 years. Oh, right across the street. He moved across the street. It's been there. At his old home on the south side, there is a hole for a drain that still has not been fixed. If you put a trail there, there is a hole. And then my drain still has a river that runs through it. Oh, there's no drain, it just runs around it. I also find it very interesting how the house, the library, the museum that was built in our town, the 5,000 square foot home on River Drive, the brand new one that looks like it belongs in Beverly Hills. It's interesting how he's not going to keep the original trail. We're going to get it on our side where we have no parking. When I originally took my status at my house and I built my home, I added 2,000 feet onto my home, I was told my property line was the water service. And I measured from the water service, and that was it. My neighbor is going to lose 5 feet of her land, and guess who's going to pay? Norco's going to pay, because I know for a fact it's her land because I built my home and I was measured by my water meter. The change from north or to south has got to stop. It's got to be in the north, period. My wife says the guy making the decision is from Eastvale. I live in Norco. I've been in the Norco schools all my life. I've lived in Norco all my life. Corona at first, went to Norco schools, and have lived there all my life. That sign's been there. That's what the old signs look like. I'm in Norco. I know the way it was. I know for a fact that people got tickets on the north side. And now you want to move it to the south side where it's unsafe. And you're going to have to cut property out and cut fences out and all that stuff. There's not much room for trees. This is not about trees for me. There's not much room for trees. If anyone wants to water a tree, great. I'm more power to them. My neighbor, Sam's wife, she waters her trees. Good for her. That's awesome. But I don't have a tree. We need to do something about this, folks. Please keep this on the north side. It just makes absolute sense. Oh, and I spoke to a bunch of people. I didn't get a survey, but I spoke to about 25, 30 riders, and I asked them north or south, and they all said north.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Dwayne Eichenberg.
Hi, Dwayne.
Hi, good evening.
How you doing?
I'm good. I live on the corner of Woodward and River Drive, across the street from my neighbor Susie here. And right now I don't have the trail is designated on my side of the street as far as I know. But I was told they were going to move it across to the other side, to the south side. I don't know, but that's where they started to put fencing when they were stopped by some of my neighbors. And if they continue to the trail on my side of the street, which is where I think they probably have it designated, then I have grass in front of my house right now. They'll be turning all that out and putting DG, and I'll have it DG storm 6 feet from my front door. So I prefer it on the other side, but it sounds like there's a lot of discrepancies in the room. So just my opinion.
Thank you.
Next speaker is John Hendrick.
Hi.
Good evening.
So I wrote something because otherwise I'll be scattered brain, so if you all don't mind if I read it. My name is John Hendrick. I live at 1446 River Drive between Woodward and Sierra. And I appreciate you guys giving us the time to share our concerns today. I believe all of you guys have seen my frantic email that I sent Thursday night. Just for the record, I am a fan of Norco's horse trail system and preserving the Norco way of life. But I think in this case, some people got a little confused because the old plan, it was always on the north side of our street. And that was a great plan. The trail was to be on the north side of the drive, closest to the river trail network. And having the horse trail zigzag across River Drive several times seems to be a not well thought out plan. It interferes with the city's improvements for the roads that you guys have planned, and it seems kind of pointlessly unsafe for the riders and the drivers. The idea should be the idea that we should shift the trail because it looks easier to put it on the wrong side of the street is the wrong idea, I think. I believe that we need to have a community discussion and get a consensus that addresses everyone's concerns on River Drive because we weren't involved in anything. We never got any notices or were told that there was a meeting or anybody was even talking about it. As you are aware, last week we were given notice they were putting the horse trail on the south side of River Drive in our section of the street. The city trail system map on the website for the city shows it on the north side of the street, and I don't understand how it was moved without notification of the residents, and preferably some input in a change like that. At 4:30 p.m., a letter was slipped into our mailboxes with no dates saying they were improving the horse trail. Unfortunately, no one is available at the city at 4:30 when I called. And we were told to move the gravel and other obstacles in the trail within the next 2 to 3 days in that letter. Some no parking signs were put out showing February 28th through the 31st. That's interesting. And the guys who were putting it out said, "Don't worry, it's next month." There's only 28 days in February, if anyone's curious. So we were under the assumption that there wasn't going to be anything happening Friday because it said on the signs, February, cool. And the guys said, February, cool. So we all went to bed to wake up the next morning at 7 a.m. and the city removing the gravel and the dirt in front of my house. And the signs were magically changed to reflect that day's date. That's a lot of bad coincidences, and perhaps the city should work to prevent that in the future. I mean, I'm sure it was all by accident. The gravel and the dirt that we put in front of my house to protect my house from the flooding from the street as the water flows down the street, because the street was paved over so many times that it now sits about 10 inches higher than my driveway. That didn't used to be the case when they built the house. So I'm asking the city council to put this project on hold and to create a way for the residents and stakeholders to work with the city to come up with a good, well thought out plan for River Drive and the trails and the street improvement projects, because our streets need some improvement over there.
Thank you, John.
All right.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
The next speaker is Jeanette Irwin.
Hi, Council.
Hi, Jeanette.
A few of you have heard from me. Chad, nice guy, but the little conversation that you were talking about.
Could you direct it to
how you-
council,
how
please?
you-
No,
oh, how
direct
he-
us, please,
okay.
not staff. Thank
How
you.
he talked about how he does the trails. That wasn't put out to me. I'm an encroachment. Sorry, I got a chain link. Sorry, my chain link is just important to me as the guy across the street or down the street that might have a brick wall and wrought iron. It's important to me. I bought my house with its encroachment. Exactly, I didn't change nothing on my home. I've lived there 31 years. He wants to come and steal it from me. You told me the reason why we were doing the switch from Temescal to Hillside was only specifically for a one little section you thought was a safety issue. That was all you explained to me why the move was going to go. And I said, that's not a safety issue. 31 years, no horses ever fell, nobody's got hurt right there, nothing. Now with moving the trail over to the south side, you are creating safety issues. You got the horses crossing at Temescal and they coming back on Hillside. You got 7 houses on the north side. You got 14 houses on the south side, smaller yards. South side utilizes the street to park. Now, not only the horses doing 2 switchbacks, now all the pedestrians and our grandkids and our kids are all going back and forth. River Drive is a legal bicycle pathway from the mountains to the ocean. It takes a jog right through. So we got horses crossing twice. Now we got nobody on the north parks on the easement of the road. Not one. Everyone on the south and between those streets park on the easement. So horses crossing twice. Now all the residents are crossing. And you have a legal pathway, sometimes 10 bicycles, sometimes 20 to 30. There's a lot of commotion, and not to top it off, River Drive and 6th Street are your 2 main thoroughfares to the freeway.
I can tell you right now, traffic is a little slow. Pandemic. It's creeping up. People are getting healthy now and they're starting more or going back. Our streets getting busier again. We went through a little low period. They run the stop signs. If somebody stops at the stop sign, a car will literally fly past them because he doesn't want to stop. It's constant. Come sit on my porch. I'm retired for 2 years. Unfortunately, I smoke cigarettes. I sit in my front porch. I can tell you who I see on a daily basis. I can tell you who a new guy is that's coming by. My neighbor Carly, she can tell you all the time she's videotaped these speedsters going. It's a ridiculous, unsafe street. And this project is doing nothing but causing horses and pedestrians. That is the safety issue. The horse riders, those people know they know their road.
Thank you.
And that's all I gotta say.
Thank you, Jeanette.
Next speaker, Armando Acuna.
Good evening. How you doing?
Good, doing well, thank you. So yes, just to reiterate what my neighbors have said, I live on River Road, been there 33 years. And thank you for the few of you that responded to my email. I'm the runner in this town. I run up one side and down the other. Came down from the golf course the other day, saw pedaling. Beautiful brand new fence, wonderful. Do miss the trees up there. Miss the trees going up 5th Street as well. Okay, so as my neighbor Jeanette was just saying, to cross the street running with horses and or bikes, let alone automobiles, would be very difficult and hazardous. Okay, I normally in the evening time will cross Hamner at my own risk and run on the west side of the 15 Hamner Avenue. The streets are wider. The trails are wider. It's safer for me. I do use a light. I will run in the streets oftentimes, just because especially if it's raining. I will run in the streets because it's wider and people see the light and they slow down, they take a wide berth. You can't do that on this side. Even with a parkway on Pedley or Foothill, I will see oncoming horse riders, vehicles, I can from the front, from the back, and I will run in the parkway that there is. Put a tree there, well, guess what? I'm just going to have to stop, which, okay, hey, life's rough, all right? But in regards to River Road, my address to you was that Horseshoe Street thoroughfare has not been touched in the 33 years I've been there, aside from simple repairs, sinkholes, and water main lines, all right? So that's something I think should be addressed before the nice picket fences go in that have to then perhaps be altered because now we're improving the streets. It seems a little backwards to me. Okay, funds are, if they're available, I get that. Save them for that street, allocate them for a later date, but let's get the street fixed. I referred to it as those streets as ankle breakers. You run at night, you have to determine what's shadow and what's pothole. Okay, very, very difficult, let alone driving. It's a slalom course. Okay, I'm at Costco rotating my tires all the time, just because the streets are that bad. All right, and forget the little bunnies that are running across and the cats and everything else. Very, very difficult. But that's my consideration, to redo the streets before you get to the trail fence. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Next speaker, Diana Hernandez.
Good evening, Council.
Good evening.
Thank you for getting back to me. I'm here to support my neighbors on the south side. I live on the south side for 12 years. I'm a rider too. I like riding on the north side. It's just always been like that since I moved here. So the north side is just best, for the riders, the Riverview, everything. If they have an issue with going down the river trail that goes down on Hillside, fix it. Why try to cause a bigger problem trying to move it to the south side? That's my thing. Just that, to take into consideration, the riders, the pedestrians that are going to be crossing, to park on the north side. So that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Next card is Carly and Sam Davis.
Good evening.
Gentlemen of the council. I'm not going to beat a dead horse to coin a pun, but I've lived in Norco since '78. Okay, in basically the same location. The trail has always been on the north side. And it is a big safety problem. I don't know if any of the council has come over to River Drive and sat there sometimes. We have a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit in the city on the streets. I dare you to find anybody doing 25 miles on river. I had a motorcycle go through there doing at least 80 miles an hour the other day. Now we're looking at putting horses, sometimes in groups of 20, crossing the streets at 2 locations, not to mention the pedestrians and the bicycles like Mike mentioned, or like Kevin mentioned. This is a big mistake. Now, if I might speak on one other term, I don't know why the city of Norco has to be different. Every city that I work in, and I'm a general contractor and an engineer, the homeowner maintains that parkway. It belongs to him. The city owns it and has the right of way because your utilities are there, but they maintain it. They irrigate it, they mow it. It's been no different in Norco. The Norco homeowners who back up to the road must clean that area. They go through, they have to cut down the weeds. If not, the fire department comes through and finds you. The city gracefully, after Edison removed our big trees in front of our house, gracefully planted 2 trees. I have no problem watering those trees. And I greatly appreciate the city planting those trees. But you really need to put some heavy thought in that trail fence going to that south side. It is a disaster waiting to happen. And I have everybody rides on that north side, large groups, because there is a trail group that lives down on Pedley, and there's another one over on California. That's how they get through the city. So you really need to take into account the major safety issue that you're going to create by doing this. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Next speaker, Jack Irwin.
Good evening.
Good evening, Council. I'm the spouse of Jeanette, and I've been at 756 River Drive for approximately 31 years, and we do a lot of porching, and I can tell you 95% of the horse riders ride on the north side. Very rarely does anybody, maybe if they come off center, they might come on in front of my property, but then they cross right away to get on the north side. Everybody rides, and I have not seen anybody have any safety issues or any problems. And I was there when Chad came and visited my wife to talk to us. And the only time we ever got a notice about this is when he's given me a letter saying he's going to move my fence. That's the only time I heard about this. We had a discussion about this, and we had a phone call with Kevin. 10 years ago or plus, there was a talk about moving everything over to the south side because the bluffs were so bad. It was a committee meeting. We all showed up because they were going to change everybody on River Drive. Everybody showed up. Right away, that committee shut that down because they knew the Army Corps of Engineers was going to build the bluff up, which gave it a lot more safety. That is the side everybody goes on. And everybody brought up all the other issues of all the safety and problems with going back and forth. Now I'm hearing it's not only between Hillside and Temescal, there's another section where it's going to go. So there's a bunch of crossing when all of it's been on the north side. And if you just physically go look down that road, you can see on the south side, very tight. And you're talking about wanting area for trees. You look on the north side, big area. The other issue is going to be, and like Kevin said, if my water meter is my property line, you're biting into more. So we're going to have to buy some property or whatever if that's the case. I'm not 100% sure. I will follow up on that. The other issue is, if we do put it on the south side, I can tell you, there's going to be parking on the north side. And right across from my street is that big house. And right now it has, there's no way I can park over there because he's got encroachments with curbs going out. So to me, and we've talked to Chad, and I understand there's encroachment problems all across the city. You can't just attack them all at once. I know you got to kind of take them one at a time, but I kind of feel like with this and notices, you're attacking at one person at a time. Make it a little bit easier to shove one guy around instead of a whole street. Because he didn't talk about that he was going to clean up. He said, oh, well, we can make him do it, but he wasn't going to send a letter to my neighbor and say, hey, you got to clean up your encroachment so I can park there. So there's a lot of concerns there. And I really think, I like what the one guy said. I know we want safety. I'm all for horses. I love this town. I love the openness of it. That's why I'm a porch animal. I talk to all the horse riders, anybody that runs, walks. I mean, it's a nice thing to do. I love Norco. I'm originally from Orange County. I always thought, oh man, why live out in that area? But I have learned to love this area. I would like us to really, I think, especially River Drive, and Kevin knows. He was told when he was young, you don't ride on that. It's too dangerous. It's too tight. There's a lot of issues, and we're trying to put a trail in there. Hopefully we can have a very good discussion on trying to come up with really a good plan that would appease everybody, so we won't have an issue with that. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Richard Hallam.
How are you doing, Richard?
I'm good, Greg. How are you?
Good. Good to see
Been
you.
a long time.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm here to talk to my friend Bill for my friend Bill Titillion, who cannot speak anymore. Susie asked me to come over. I guess some guy showed up at her property the other day and told her, you can't park here anymore, and we're going to put a horse trail over here with no warning, no issue of a hearing on it. Since when did Norco start doing that? I was a commissioner here for 16 years. I know that's not what's right. They just showed up. And that's backwards, you know. That can maybe happen in Corona, not in Norco. Anyhow, I remember I was sitting with Hal Clark one day at the donut shop, and Bill Titillion came in, and he told me, he said, you know, Richard, I'm going to move my fence closer into my property so that we can park a car over there in the horse trailer. And Hal told him, said, I wouldn't do that because one of these days they're going to claim that as their property if you move your fence in. And there was 2 huge trees there, which Dick Merget cut down for Bill and got him out of there. And Bill paid for those trees to be taken out. That was his property. Joe Shank told Hal Clark that his property line went all the way to the blacktop. And now all of a sudden, there's no utilities there. It's not an easement. There's no utilities, no water, no sewer, no nothing. There is an area drain there that they put in because that was in a flood zone. And the most that trail can be and maintain the street the way it is 7 feet. If they put it in front of her on River right there on the south side. And 4 feet in from the corner, there's a big drain. That's about almost a 2-foot drop off where they put some asphalt there, everything goes into that drain. So that's going to leave 2 feet for a horse to travel on before it's running into the fence. It's ridiculous. That's crazy. That's going to be a big dangerous situation. So, you know, if they're going to do something, they need to let the residents know. They need to go, hey, you know what, we're going to have a hearing on this. We want input, not just come and start doing it. Thanks.
Thank you, Richard.
The next speaker is Linda Manning.
Good evening.
Good evening.
How are you?
I'm fine. How are
Good.
you? I'm here not to talk about so much the trail. I understand what they're all discussing because it will affect me. My husband and I ride every single weekend. We ride down River Road. If that trail were to get onto the other side, the issue that we had on Sunday, which the gentleman back there witnessed, we have bicyclists that are coming through River Road every Saturday and Sunday. We have been almost off that cliff twice because they have no regard for us. They will not slow down. They will not stop. I literally this time, which the gentleman witnessed, took my horse and stuck him out in the street in front of them, trying to get them to stop. They stopped literally 6 feet in front of me. I explained to them what was happening to the horse. Could they not understand what understand what they were seeing. Not one of them said one word. Not one of them apologized. Not one of them did anything. They all took their bike, went on the other side of me, and went off. Time before that, literally, I came across 30 of them. My husband's horse did step off the cliff. My horse went 50 feet down the road and twice almost went off the cliff. This is getting to be, River Road is one of the most dangerous places to ride, and that is where we access the river. If we can no longer go that way, it's going to destroy everything that we have. We have this town to ride in. We should feel safe to ride in it. These bicyclists don't live in town, which I can't say that for sure, but I can almost guarantee you that 99% of them do not have horses and they do not live in this town. I pay the taxes. I've lived here for over 30 years. And I just think it's a shame that they can come in here, they can take our trails and they can use them as they please with absolutely no regard for us. That is our safety. And to be honest, that pretty trail that is put along River Road there, it would have done more good to put it along the edge and not along the edge of the street, because now if we would have been in that area when those bikes came through, the only place for us to go would have been off. There would have been no safety net for us. At least with it over against the edge, you've got something there to somewhat protect you. If a horse is going to go, it's going to go. But at least it's got something there that it can see to hopefully stop us. So my question is I just hope that something can be done about these bikes. It's just, like I said, they have absolutely no regard for us. And this is happening quite often, which I know they see all the time. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Sigrid Williams.
Greetings, Mayor Newton and council members.
Hi, Secret.
How are you?
I'm good.
One of the hardest things you as our city representatives have to do is to create good policy and enforce policy of this city. While the current trail standards include pedestrian and equestrian standards, city standards, trail materials, fencing, trees, and mapping, I want to speak on encroachments and illegal trespass and nuisance, because that's what an encroachment is. There's a lot of dissent regarding trail standards, especially the encroachment of some properties onto the trails, and then the potential loss of property to others and a fight with the city because trails are not wide enough or wanting to move trails. It is your responsibility to protect the individual liberties of the residents of this town, hold those accountable that have encroached onto the trails, and protect those owners whose properties are adjacent to trails from city encroachment. You are setting a dangerous precedence if you allow for or authorize the extension of a person's property into a horse trail. Again, that's an encroachment, or attempt to violate a property owner's use and quality of life. You have a legal obligation to ensure easements are used for their intended purpose without other property owners to satisfy outdated standards. There are properties throughout this city that have encroached their lawns, driveways, hedges, vegetation into the horse trails. There are properties that have blocked trails with chain link fences and concrete driveways. Some city personnel have said it was more a fight to try and relieve the trail encroachments than to move the trails to the other side of the street. And I absolutely disagree. Property owners do not have a right to prevent access across an easement. Easement owners have a legal right to maintain the easement, and the law is pretty clear that easements are a right to use a certain area of land for a purpose consistent with the easement purpose. Don't disenfranchise other property owners because it's easier for the city. Our trail system is consistent or is considered a public right of way. Some of you have bragged about how many miles we have in this city. Stand by our trail system and create consistent standards that will work for the greatest good. When deciding on trail standards, please take your time to address all the issues of today as they pertain to our trails and Norco lifestyle. Use the expertise of Stuck and even create an ad hoc committee to committed Norconians who are willing to put the time and effort into developing a well-rounded trail standard proposal that can be be implemented for the betterment of the city, not any one individual. Your 2018 Comprehensive Trail Master Plan detailed the purpose of the trails and the trail system itself. 4 years ago, it was suggested that the city should consider creating other standards for trail development. Other than the suspension of interlocking brick pavers in 2015 and language pertaining to wood and PVC fencing in 2016, the city is still using the trail standards signed into effect in January 2005. And that's just, I just don't understand that one. If legitimate, current, comprehensive, and consistent standards are not developed and then upheld, you will eventually end our trail system and the lifestyle every one of you claim to support and protect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mike Williams.
Mike.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council, staff. I hate following my wife, but here I am. I seem to remember this conversation of trails and River Drive coming up. Councilman Hoffman to correct me or not, but it was when the Santa Ana River Trail conversation came up. And the councilman said we ought to drag our feet a little bit because we're getting ahead of ourselves. It's probably good information now that I'm seeing all this. I get to hear about all this on Stuck Commission, and I appreciate being part of that for sure. As my wife pointed out, there's a lot of issues concerning the trails here in Norco. Why are we at this point? I don't think everybody considers outwardly that the all-purpose trail system, they are our sidewalks. If these were concrete sidewalks, we wouldn't be having this talk. It'd be pretty straightforward. The right-of-ways are usually purposed when the streets come through. With all the encroachments that I see in town, you know, that's past council staff and so on that has allowed that, or just let it kind of just go under the radar and not do anything about it. You've got a job on your hands. I think it is well within your right to make these corrections, but it's going to be hat in hand, and it's probably going to cost a few bucks to make it happen. But I don't see where you've got another choice. You know, I'm fully in support of what the residents on River Drive are saying, and I understand it because I ride a lot, and I don't like River Drive. It's ridiculous. But that is eventually going to be the Santa Ana River Trail extension until they get that trail done completely. I know you've got some contact with real estate attorney. As far as these encroachments go, it might be wise to maybe reach out to them and see what they think. I would also like to address the trail parking code violation and the amount of money that it's $125, I think, so it's listed on the sign. I think we need to revisit that. I think that's an old number. I think $125 isn't enough to get most people out of bed in the morning. Okay, got to make a statement. People park on these trails all the time. It's getting ridiculous, and I don't blame law enforcement. They got their hands full. All right, but we need to do something to allow people to see that we're serious about this trail system. It's the foundation of this town. I'd really like to see this come in front of Stuck, possibly Parks and Rec, as they handle a lot of what goes on in the hills. But I think we all need to get our heads together and get this problem taken care of and try and assist in this. We've got to hold on to our trail system. I carry this to every meeting. Trail standards. Okay, there's a reason we have this. They give this to us so we can have some idea what to go to and a Bible to pay attention to for the city. It's awfully important. And thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike.
The last speaker card is Bill Naylor.
Evening, Bill.
Good evening, Council. Just basically, I'm going to agree with most of the people that spoke tonight. There is some real issues in the city, and I'm one of the riders that ride River Drive a lot, and I do ride on the north side. I think even if they put the trail on the south side on that block and a half or 2 blocks, I'd still probably ignore the trail and ride on the other side, unless what they've indicated is most of the residents on that side that do park on the south side would end up having to park on the north side, and then that would force us out into the street. So there is some real issues there. But and most of it's encroachment issues. And over the years, and I'm honestly, most of you know that I've been on the Streets and Trails Commission a couple of years before I got off of it, and there was a number of issues with encroachments throughout the city. People come to me and say, well, what about this area and what about this area? And it's mostly that the city just generally does not want to address. It's a pain in the rear end to have to deal with a property owner that has actually encroached into the property. It can be expensive to deal with it. I know we're dealing with it in Parks and Recreation Commission and staff over at City Park area. We've had to go and get a surveyor to survey the property just to see if the trail is in fact, if these folks have actually encroached into it, and we're waiting back for that response there. So please be very careful about what you're doing. I think you're doing the right thing. I agree with Ted on the width of the parkway along the trail in between the fence, because most horses get really spooky when you're right on the street and a car comes whizzing by, especially from behind you. If you're over 3-5 feet, it gives them a little bit more cushion. And also, if there are trees there, it gives them a little more confidence that there's not something that's going to crash into them. Just some things to think about. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Mayor, I have no further speaker cards on this item.
Thank you, Dana. Bring this back to council for discussion and some action. And first, I'd like to make a couple of comments and ask, thank you all for your comments and showing up. And I've never ridden on the south side. I've always ridden on the north side, on River Drive, okay? So I think what I'd like to do, if this is all right, is kind of go in some sections here. The Sierra Woodward section, and try to address that, and then further down Temescal almost to Hillside. We've had plenty of conversations. If you'd like to address it overall,
sure.
First, please, Chad.
I think again with this item certainly was discussed at length at Streets and Trails, and it came before council, and admittedly and correctly as the residents have talked about, there was no direct notification provided to the residents about that discussion. You know, they were never part of it, and that's a fact. And so their information and their concerns and their history is always important. And the overall goal with this, and it was something that Streets and Trails wanted to do, is establish an official trail. I know there's been conversations about there's been signs out there, this or that. Unfortunately, those signs were put out as directives by past administration, but nothing was ever adopted by the council to create a trail. So there's nothing that documents that. So the reality is that we were trying to, again, establish the trail because it's been asked for years. I think what we put up is functional, it's useful on the open areas. I think my recommendation to council would be if you're in a mindset of to defer right now and to not put up any of the remaining trail between Woodward and Sierra, and also between Temescal and Hillside, that would probably be the best course of action right now. As the residents talked about, and council knows as horse riders, that Norconian horse riders will go where they want to go. And regardless of the surface material, et cetera, they know what they want to do and where they're going to go. And they'll continue the activity they have been now. But don't classify it as a trail. Because if you classify it as a trail, it implies a certain obligation to the city to maintain it in a certain way. So it creates a liability if we're not going to maintain it. And because really it just is a dirt shoulder. So my suggestion was just to keep it as it is. Remove that section as a defined trail. It's just a pathway. It's an open shoulder either way. Folks can go on either side of the road. It's just not a trail. And you have the other sections that are already against the river that we've established. We put trail fencing there. I think they're very functional, and they provide a good buffer between the roadway. But I think in those sections, based off of the comments from the residents, to implement a true trail or even a functional trail, there are a lot of encroachments that we need to deal with. And if that's not something that council wants to address at this time, but maybe in the future, my suggestion would be to eliminate the need or the desire for the trail on those sections we just talked about, and just leave them as open parkways, not defined as trails, because I want to make sure we don't establish them, and if we never maintain them, don't doing something that really isn't used for that, then it creates another liability. It's just a dirt shoulder. And again, our general liability for dirt shoulders too, if we have ruts, if there's a drop off, we'll go fill that up. But we're not grooming it. We're not trying to remove any other encroachments. It's just is what it is, what the community is used to and has been used to for many, many years. That might be the most proactive way of handling this issue currently, until such time we actually have a larger discussion about those areas, what can be done, what should be done in order to accommodate a reasonable trail. Because in no way, shape, or form on either side of the road, in either section, are you going to get a true trail. It's just not wide enough to do a 6-foot parkway and a 12-foot trail. It's always going to be some sort of hybrid if we do anything. But definitely, I think that might be the best way to go in addressing the concerns of the residents at this time. Because again, as has been indicated, they use the north side. They've done it for a long time without any fencing. In fact, there were more encroachments and other things in the way, or not encroachments, but things in the way with trees and stuff. A lot of those have already been removed because they were dead or dying, or they were damaged by Edison. So there's even more space than there was. But I think that might be the most proactive way at this time, and then we can take our time deciding in the future with resident engagement if there's going to be something done, how it will be done, and to get their feedback on that in the future.
What I'd like to say before I turn it over is that on the Woodward section, on my trail map, it's always shown to be an unimproved trail on the north side. And I think my feeling is at this time, leave it an unimproved trail as shown on the map.
My comment has been to the residents is actually that's an error in the map, in that if that is a trail, it is completely unusable because of on the north side, that section
right.
to Woodward, because of the elevation on the east side and all the infrastructure that's in the way. So I don't know, because obviously I have not been here 30 years. I don't know if that was ever functional as a trail, but it's certainly not functional trail anymore. You will absolutely be in the roadway if you're going to traverse through that section. So I don't think it is a wise thing to keep it there indicated as a trail at this time. Until
then you could remove it as take out the unimproved trail.
Correct.
And like everybody knows, we'll find our own way.
Absolutely.
Okay. As far as the resident that had the rock removed, I'd like to see all that rock brought back to his property.
Yeah, what we did, and we told them when we were out there, is that all the rock was retained until there was a chance for the residents to talk to the council, and if ultimately there was not going to be a trail there, that we'd bring all the rock material back and put it back in place. We took pictures before it was removed, and we have a good idea of where everything was, and we could try to place that back as best we can. Nova has all that material, and we can make that and correct that issue. Absolutely.
Okay, and then just the last thing that I had before we move further down the street with trail fencing is whether we pause the fencing, we need to get some more current signage up there. And not only that it's horse trail signage, but also the yield signs, for the bicyclists.
Okay.
Okay, it's like the triangle, who yields to whom.
Yeah, I guess we didn't think about the bicycles when we can add that in as an element. We certainly have all the signage that we're planning to put up on order and waiting for it to add it to all the current sections we just did, including where the trail ends and proceed with caution when you end up going into the street along that river road edge. So all that trail signage has been ordered and we're waiting for it. We're going to put all those along that section where the new fencing is. We can look at adding a signage onto those poles that are going to be put in, reminding bicyclists to yield.
Yeah, Michelle knows, it's a standard, pedestrian, bicycle, equestrian. And I would do that maybe in some multiple locations.
Right.
And the other is that the fencing, the pinch point right there, right at the cliff. I think we need to look at that fencing there. Whether the fencing should be on the slope side. I mean, I'd rather bail out into the street than go over the cliff.
Which section are you talking about? I apologize, because there's a couple pinch points. Which one going where?
I'm going to say closer to Hillside, right? That's,
Okay.
yep.
Okay, so you're talking about the hillside going west, going east, because there's
Yeah.
no fencing along
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no fencing in interior along the edge of the
Right.
of the
What we were looking
the bluffs.
Yeah. So, sorry. Robin, comments? No, I didn't.
Yeah, you did.
I just, Ted? No, I'll call on Ted. Watch.
Yeah, okay. All right. And only because Chad and I had this conversation, and I agree with you. Some kind of a fence in that area where Hillside and the trail goes down there. And I would suggest if we have to fence that on the cliffside, we look at a taller size. I'm not a fan of chain link on there. I would go for the 3-rail fence up there, at least so it's 5 foot high. Like I said, it's just, that's me. The other thing, when we talk about that hillside, and you, Chad and I had this conversation, right there where the trail is, goes down into the riverbed.
At Hillside?
And I know that that's going to take an engineering process to do that correctly. I was with one of our maintenance guy that we tried to fix it, and he tipped the tractor over there. Yes. So I don't want to see that happen again. And so we need to look at that to engineer, because what happens is that drain is on the top, and that gets real narrow where we have the trail at over there. That will be on the west side of Hillside. And as you get through, and the other thing, and I got a couple of things, on these encroachments, and this is what I'd like to see you do, is you don't have to do all of them, but maybe take a look. And unfortunately, encroachments, the only time that code enforcement deals with them, or you deal with them, is when you find them, or somebody complains. And Greg and I have already been through one resident on Detroit about this. Again, the old former employees of the city, or the old public works directors, or the old city man. Yeah, you can do that. It's fine. Nobody's going to care. Well, it cares until somebody complains. And then that's what happens. So those areas that we have where there are encroachments, and they have, and through, what we do is we may take sections of that are causing those pinch points, and just look at those, and come look at them, and maybe if you have to come back to us, let's look at them, because we don't, as Kevin says, the trails are important, and if we can't keep having these encroachments, it's because that's what it is. So that's what I'm looking at.
Just so you're aware, right now, at least my practice in the department is that obviously there's tons of encroachments everywhere.
Yes.
When we find and hear about brand new encroachments, like folks built something into the parkway and they didn't realize it was theirs, or they couldn't do it, we get that out right away, because we don't want to keep adding to the backlog of what's there. Then we normally will deal with it on a case-by-case basis as we do projects. So we don't try to ignore it and go, I don't see that. I try to actively go and engage and find out what can we do to recoup the city's right-of-way to improve the trails. And that's really all we're talking about, is really we're focused on the trail side encroachments that impact that width. That's what we look at. Because we can't tackle everything. And again, all those are always a case-by-case basis, what we can do, because the whole encroachment issue is much, much bigger. And we'll have that discussion sometime down the road, especially on the backyard trails. There's a lot of encroachments there, and how we're going to handle that, and to make them functional, et cetera. But so I just want to at least let you know that we do endeavor to try to stop all new encroachments, especially when we find out about them, and don't just leave them. And then we case by case, we deal with the ones as they're in the line of our project. So we take care of them there, but we've not tried to endeavor to tackle all of them everywhere, because that's a much bigger discussion.
I don't expect you to tackle all of them, but we do run into them, and there's plenty in this town. But good, no one ever did anything. And then I was on Streets and Trails when we discussed SART, the Santa Ana River Trail, long before your time. That bicycle trail is very important. It's it starts from River Road, Corridon, goes across, goes through Alhambra, jumps down to Taft, comes back out, and heads down to River Drive, winding through Detroit, winders through. The signs are important, but that trail was an adopted trail. It's been there since 2009 when we approved that. So it's nothing new. It's an education thing about the bicycle riders and the equestrian riders and the pets, because that is the thing. Until this is the section that's not done yet, right here in Norco. And we are working with the Riverside County Parks and the Crested Coast Trail to get it done. Ours is the only section not finished, and that's. And then there's one other thing. Yeah, and you're right. Some of the residents are right. That chain link fence wasn't put up until the stabilization plan, before the old trees, things like that. I can remember my friend Tom Marshall went off the side of the cliff, right down there on the hill, right on River Drive one night in 1969. So it is, there it is. It was nothing there to protect him. And that's why that area was actually helped when they stabilized the bluff. So that's it, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. Catherine? Kevin?
So anyway, I concur with the mayor. To call the north side of the street, there's one house that goes down a hill. You literally can't ride there. And the truth is, people unofficially are riding on the south side anyway. It hasn't been a problem. I just think just leave it alone, as Chad and the mayor suggest. In terms of River Road, I do think, when we rated the streets, though, as I recall, that street did not rate that badly compared to some of the other streets that we're repairing now. But can we look at that section of River Drive? Because they're saying it's built up so much that now the houses are below grade.
Yeah, we can look at it. Woodward's actually really bad.
Yeah, so go ahead and just...
That whole U that they were mentioning.
If we could just look at those, and then also look at the other, going on to Sierra and that kind of thing, I think that's a good idea. And then a gentleman mentioned the two drains. Can we look at those two drains? Can we connect with that gentleman and find out what drains specifically he's talking about? Is it part of a county project we're going to be doing? Let's find out why.
It's not part of any project. We were waiting on doing anything because we wanted to figure out, is the trail going to go on that side or not?
Okay.
So now that the trail, in theory, may not go there, we can address the drain issue by itself, because we were going to incorporate all that work together. So we were waiting to figure out what were happening. So if that doesn't occur, we'll focus on the drain.
So I think Kevin, is that your name? Kevin, I think just connect with Chad and find out what the status on that is, or you can call any of the council people, because now it's on our radar. In terms of, I rode River Road when there was still a chain link fence all along there. It all washed away, 20, 30 feet. Truthfully, I wasn't allowed really to ride there when I was a kid. I know some people consider themselves skilled, but it's dangerous. It's really dangerous, some of those squeeze points. I'm not in favor of crossing the street, but I do think there should be signage say those sections ride at your own risk, because it's not safe, and especially those squeeze points. And in terms of the home that was recently built, those encroachments are recent. So I think that because I really have a problem with, we're going to ask somebody over here to move their encroachment, but we're not going to ask this person over there to move their encroachment. The bottom line is, as Sigrid said, you're all taking city property. And the reality is that we just don't enforce it unless it becomes a problem. And in this case, I just can't see crossing streets and all that kind of stuff. But I think you need to talk to that gentleman. And, sometimes we're just going to have some wider, some, as you described before. There was one other thing. Oh, trail standards 2005. I don't think that's correct. We've messed with trails. We did Richard and I actually did the first Coast to Crest bike trail in the late 90s on Park and Rec, 2001, 2002, and then trail standards is something that we've been developing all along. So it's really not correct just to say we're a 2005 trail standard. Drain, driveways, Sierra. Finally, it's really important that we get our notification system better, because right now, and I keep saying this like a drum, there are people in the government above us that are trying to take away local control, which really means the power of somebody to influence us at that podium. We're a government that was built on moving from the bottom up. And so if we have to make sure that people at that podium know to be at the podium to begin with when things are coming up, even though a whole bunch of meetings happened, but they didn't know about them. And we also, pretty much, I would have given anybody whatever they wanted because we didn't tell them. And so then we're guilty of what those above us are doing by trying to strip away that ability. And so it's just really important and this keeps coming up, but somehow we've got to find a way of reaching out to residents so they know to come. And so that's just, and I really appreciate, Chad, that you've just copped to it. And I really, really appreciate that. And I know that you've kind of gotten your legs cut out from underneath you on this thing, but so have we. So somehow we've got to notify people better. We've got to do that. And that's all I have, Mr. Mayor. I'm totally in concurrence with what you're saying.
Ted?
Mr. Mayor, one other comment. And John, do you remember Corona Avenue between 2nd and 3rd when that trail was impassable? What I'm worried about, Kevin, is what you said, right at your own risk, because we inherited a liability. But that trail there's that section that wasn't heading wide enough and it had to go over the hill. What did we do to make that? I don't think we put a sign there, right at your own risk.
There is.
There's a sign that says right at your own risk?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's right, because I think we would inherit a liability if we...
When I was a kid, we couldn't ride Crestview, that section, and River Road. And River Road had fences all along it, and they all washed down the hill.
But I'm just worried about right at your own risk signage. I think what we
or
put
whatever
on Corona,
whatever it is you do.
Yeah, whatever we put on Corona Avenue would probably be a better.
Okay. Do you have a direction?
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, Kevin, let's go ahead. Thank you once again. Let's take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and finish up with our next item. Thank you. Okay, we'll come back to order. Our next item, 6B, is the 5 Keys School and Program Update. Michelle.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of City Council. Tonight's presentation and discussion focuses on the status of the current MOU of the Ecological Agricultural Training Cultural Center, also known as EATS, and Amendment Number 1 as it pertains to the Norco Rural Farmers and Artisans Market. One of the requirements to the amendment is that 5 Keys report to the City Council every 6 months to present information on attendance, financial sustainability, community response, vendor participation, and any other issues, favorable or unfavorable, encountered in the operation of the farmers market. The 6-month update will be elaborated in the presentation before City Council this evening and will allow City Council to have dialogue with 5 Keys representatives regarding the status of the program, the Norco Rural Farmers and Artisans Market, and the future vision of the 5 Keys schools and programs. I would like to turn this over to the 5 Keys schools and programs representatives, Patrick Mitchell and Chris Fauché.
Good evening.
Good evening. I'm going to do a lot more tonight than talk about the farmers market. We're going to give you a full our year in review, so you'll get to hear a lot more than just that. And as you all probably know, I'm going to ask you all for some things as well. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I want to thank you guys for the opportunity to come out and talk to you about the work that we've been able to do, and thank you, because all of this was possible because of your guys' support. So let's see if I can hit this right. The mission of the Ecological Agriculture Training Cultural Center and Farm is to train farmers, engage farmer families, and create community around ecologically based, socially just, and economically sustainable agriculture throughout Southern California, but in particular in Norco, where we have a long heritage of that. This past year, 2021, we had 300 drop-in visitors to the center. We have 28 apprenticeship students. We had 1,500 interactions with businesses, community members, interested parties, small farms throughout the region, and we estimate we had about 7,000 visitors to the market. The apprenticeship program that we offer had 28 students go through it, 2 cohorts. We're in the middle of the 2nd cohort now. We had 8 students graduate from the 1st cohort. That's a 10-month program. 6 new farms were created here in Norco. 3 apprenticeship students went on to start other kinds of agriculture or rural lifestyle businesses. 16 participants currently are in the 2nd cohort, and going through 6 of those are actively developing commercial farm operations, and 4 are approaching it more from a self-sustainable sort of modern homestead approach. We have another program we call the Farm Program, which is the Family Agriculture Revival Movement. We hosted 3 potlucks in 2021. It was an opportunity for anyone interested in local agriculture to get together. 20 people attended those, at least 20 to each of those. The first one was hosted by Tavali Ranch, which is one of the newest farms here in town. The other 2 were actually at the Eat Center, and you can see from the picture it's like a big family get together. This coming year, the Eat Farm Program will host 10 workshops, celebrations, and special events. We're doing 3 separate series of workshops this year. The first one will be based around good soil and include compost workshops. Those are all open to the public. The second series will be focused on poultry, and we'll do biosecurity practices, egg handling, and poultry processing. And then the third one is about local nature, and we'll focus on attracting pollinators, the role of native plants on farms and ranches, and an introduction to beekeeping. The collaboration between the city and the Eat Center and 5 Keys has continued. Last time I spoke to you guys, you asked for some improvement on the landscaping and our care for the area, so we have upped that significantly. We have just really tried to create a agricultural feeling when people go by the building. So we'll continue to do that. We are adding a tool and equipment library, which is unique, so that one of the hardest parts for new farmers is startup costs. But so we are writing grants to purchase some of those higher end tool and equipment costs, so that it brings that startup challenge down for new farmers. We started an edible landscape out in front of the building. We have used that edible landscape as an opportunity for our apprenticeship students to learn irrigation installation, direct seeding, transplanting. We do fruit tree grafting, all sorts of stuff there. So it really is a hands-on experience for them. And later in the presentation, we'll get to how we hope to expand that experience. There's a list here of the edible plants that have been installed. We worked with Troop 33 to install a pollinator garden along the road there. We did 120 native plants in 550 square feet, and then overseeded it with wildflowers. If you come by now, you don't actually see the plants that are in the picture here because they're all covered by blooming wildflowers. So it's a kind of a nice view today. A couple of pictures here of the end process. We started working to rehabilitate the middle room in the center. We're going to call this room the Norco Valley Agricultural Heritage Room. We're going to have reprints of historic photos, artifacts, things like that in that room, so people can come and visit and get a little bit of the history of our agricultural heritage, but also use that room for classes, workshops. The Norco Chamber has started holding their board meetings there. We've had inquiries from other organizations that may want to use it, and so it's just kind of increasing that community engagement. So on to the market. We started the market in July. And there's some information here, but I'm going to show a quick video here on the market, and if you can get that started here. of all of the folks you saw there, everyone was from Norco except for one vendor, and that was Tiny Leaf Farm. They're from Corona, and they're desperately trying to find a place to farm in Norco. So it really is a unique community market. A list again here of the farms that have been established through the EAT program and sell at the market. Couple more photos. Now on to some of the things other types of things we're doing and would like to do. We want to expand the ag education and farm space. You guys have received, I sent you all a proposal about that. We've presented it to the Parks Commission. And we want to create a training farm at Community Center Park where the pool used to be. We think it's an appropriate place to create a small educational enterprise farm. We'll tell you a little about it, why we think it's great. It's great access from the EAT Center to be able to cross the street and go and take what we're doing in the classroom, the theory we're learning in the classroom, and put it into hands-on work and learn that by practice, not just by theory. The farm will consist of 4 major horticultural components: row crops, framed raised planting beds, a container orchard, and native pollinator gardens. We'll also have a shade house, equipment shed, program workspace. All of this is portable and temporary, knowing that the park will undergo a master planning program here pretty soon. Hopefully we can engage enough of the community that we become a long-term part of that, but we understand that the planning process may move us in another direction. But in the meantime, we think we can be a real asset to that area. To go on the raised planting beds, you can see at the lower end of this slide, there'll be 12 of them. 6 of those will be accessible to wheelchairs. The other 6 standard ground-based ones. The container orchards are again portable. They'll be in a wicking tub concept, low water use. The planting blocks will have 4 different planting blocks. Each will have 10 100-foot rows of row crops. All of that is annual crops, and really it covers the diversity of small farm operations here. We've gotten a lot of community support towards this program already. Veg Fresh Farms in Corona, local produce packing farms, giving us $5,000 to help develop the farm. The Glide Foundation's given us $3,000 towards the purchase of tools and equipment. All of those tools and equipment become available in the lending library after we establish the farm. And then just recently, the end of December, we got $8,000 from the Foundation for Sustainability and Innovation towards the development of the farm. So, we're sitting on $13,000 to make this project happen, which for a small farm is, we think, plenty to get it off the ground. It's a collaboration, again, between the city and the EAT Center. Will offer workshops, lots of opportunities with the programs that are already happening at the community center, as well as increased opportunities, one-day workshops and things like that for city residents. One of the newest things that's happened with the EAT Center is this connection with the Riverside Food Systems Alliance, who historically has tried to get a farmer training program off the ground. and through several attempts, it just hasn't worked, and they recognized what we were doing in Norco was working, and they have asked us to run their new program. So their students, we will help recruit. They will come to Norco for training. Historically, this has been a very expensive program, thousands of dollars to be enrolled in it. We will offer it for free, just like we do all of our training programs. And so it expands what we're doing in Norco to a regional effort now. One of the other exciting parts of that is the program's being recognized by the University of California Riverside Extension Program, so that students in our program, if they'd like to pay the fee, can get 18 extension credits as a part of it. There's no requirement to do that. Everybody gets the same education, whether they're part of the existing apprenticeship program, the Next Gen Farmer Training, or part of the extension. It's all the same class. It just depends on whether you want the piece of paper or just the experience. We also would like to put up a greenhouse in the back of the building, between the building and Hamner, where the old portable building used to be that was recently removed. We thank you very much for the removal of that. There were lots of problems that came along with that, and we see it as an opportunity to expand the visual impact of what we're doing in this space, and really connect with travelers down Hamner so they can see there's a lot of new things happening, and it would just enhance the commitment of the city and the EAT program to agriculture education. With that, I'll open it up to questions and see if I can answer them all. I did give you guys all the a more detailed printout of this, and so I hope that you have the information. But
thank you. Robin, any questions?
Yes, I have a few. Are you ready?
Yes, I hope so.
I hope so too. So the first one, or the first couple, might actually be for Michelle, and then I'll come back to you. Michelle, in the report, you talk about the fiscal impacts of our partnership with 5 Keys. We're not going to recoup our costs, right, on this. And I think we all knew that going in, that we're looking for community involvement and other types of engagement. From the Parks and Recreation standpoint, has there been anything in that area? I have not been contacted, no. Okay. The next question that I have that'll probably be to you, in our MOU, we talk about documentation of attendance, course credits completed, meeting requirements as far as business licenses for our vendors. Have you gotten any reports, or are all of the vendors at the market in compliance?
I have received some information on some vendors, and no, they're not all in compliance, but I believe Patrick is working on that, and there's some things that we have to tighten up in that respect.
Okay, thank you. So then, Patrick, questions for you. We signed the first MOU in November of 2019, and then we did the amendment for the farmers market. I'm looking for the date. Oh, in July of 21.
Yeah.
What's a reasonable timeline for us to expect that you have your paperwork done and your ducks in a row?
Well, I think we ran into a lot of challenges in that period with the pandemic, and when we signed the original one, we really thought we'd be moving in that direction. I actually worked for most of 2020. A good portion of that is a volunteer, trying to keep the program up and operating. And so there were some challenges there. I worked part-time until August of last year when I came on after I met with you guys and you asked for more commitment to the program and things. And so, you know, I think there were some challenges, certainly on my part. I didn't meet all of those commitments, but I think we're back on track now, and this is the beginning of that tonight. So.
Okay. The next question on your proposal for the garden.
Yes.
At the community center, is it simply a training garden for the center, or is there going to be community access to the garden, and what does that look like?
It should be clear, this is not a community garden. We're not managing community gardening spaces, things like that. But there will be, the farm will be open daily. So there's absolutely an opportunity for the community to come in and learn from what's happening there. We will have interpretive signage, things like that throughout the farm so they can learn what's happening there. The next step of that would be working with Michelle to develop workshops and programming through the recreation department to engage those community members.
Okay. Next question. You talked about in your report you had 28 apprentice students, 6 new farms, 8 graduates. And I know there's going to be some seasonal fluctuations in the market. But I think part of when we're training people for agriculture, and probably the hardest part, is knowing planting and when you can do things and when you need to do things so that you are available for a market.
Yes.
12 months and not 6 months or 5 months or whatever. So why do we not see more of the graduates and the farms at the market on a consistent basis?
I think the biggest challenge in that has been people have left regular careers to go into farming. These were not people who necessarily had all of that. And agriculture is a challenge no matter how long you've done it. And so I think there's a learning curve for new farmers on that. I think we'll see better performance in the future, but I think you know, there's a level of excitement that comes along with a new farm, and you've got all the stuff in the ground, and it's a wonderful experience. But you know, every 10 days you've got to be in there putting in new seeds for that next round, and we don't necessarily have the ability to make sure they're doing that. We can encourage it, we can train them on that, but that's, you know, at some point. Those students go out on their own, and whether they make that or not, it can be a challenge. But I do think there's been some lessons learned, and we'll see better performance.
Okay. And then the last question that I have for right now, in the MOU and in the amendments, it talks about partnership. What has the city of Norco received as a partner to 5 Keys?
I think you've received a lot of promotion. We have statewide promoted Norco as a place for people to come to live a rural lifestyle, to start small farms, to raise livestock, to be involved in that sense. So I do think there's some marketing benefit the city's got. I think we have certainly tried to reach out to the community of Norco and engage them in every way that we could on a small budget and a small staff. But I think if the city has additional ideas and interests, we're always open to hearing what that is.
Okay, sorry, I have 2 more questions. In your presentation, you talked about the poultry series, for example, and I'm looking at what you say you're going to offer here and then what's on the calendar. And for example, like the poultry processing or meat bird processing isn't listed
in your calendar? Is that because?
Part of that is because we haven't lined up the instructor to do that at the moment, so. But not because we're not doing it, just because we haven't set that date or that timeline.
And then, for real, my last question this time, you talked about promoting the city and working with the city. Then why would we not use the Parks and Recreation Department, or why has the Parks and Recreation Department not been contacted about events or team communication? I don't think I've ever seen anything like on the weekly update that comes out or any of that, and I just feel like there's been a bit of a lag in that department.
Okay, I will accept that, and that's probably on our end a failure. I do think, again, you know, our staff time has been short. It's basically me running programs, maintaining the building, trying to do the outreach, and so you know, hopefully in the next 3 to 4 months we'll see some new grants come in that can help pay for additional staff and be able to increase that. But I'll accept that and work harder to make that happen.
Thank you.
Ted?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Michelle, we don't allow subletting, do we, in our facilities?
It would be in the agreement, and I did not see anything about subletting.
And this goes to his statement on the meeting room.
With the chamber?
With the chamber, and he wants to have other meetings there from other groups. As far as I know, we don't sublet.
What's your definition of subletting?
That's just it. Subletting, it's yours, nobody else's.
Okay, so we can't allow other people to use those
It's an
rooms?
MOU that allows it.
Okay, all right, we can.
Is that, I mean, that's basically what we've been used in most of our facilities in Park and Recreations, correct?
Yes, for the youth sports groups, we do not allow subletting at all.
And we don't allow it up there at the park either, at Ingalls. Nope. And this is one of the facilities.
Okay.
So
we saw that as community engagement.
I understand. I'm just
happy to cancel that.
Trying to clarify that subletting, and I was reading through here and I saw that. Now I know that we have generously and in your own paperwork, free business license to sell at the market. We have done that. So they're going to send and they're going to turn in reports. I'm trying to figure out. You estimate more than 7,000 people have attended the market, and that $35,000 has been injected into the local economy by the market. Where do we get those numbers?
Estimates from vendors on what they've spent on supplies locally, things like that. It's all estimates. We don't have hard numbers on that, but that's a guesstimate in terms of you know, what people are doing locally. Are they eating after the market? What did they spend on fuel? Just things like that. So it's a accumulation of what we believe people have spent because of the market.
Okay. And with these business licenses that we have allowed them to sell, we're not getting any sales reports, right? I mean, Lisette or Andy, we get nothing. And most of this is agricultural, which you don't have sales tax anyway, but the other products we would be getting. So we have no information about the merchants or artisans, what they're selling. We have nothing coming back to us.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's...
Okay. We can provide some of that.
Okay. Let me go back through the other thing. And this is over on the new project over there. You commented that we're going to have wheelchair access for your beds. How are they going to get there? The only reason I'm saying is because the ramps that are there are not ADA compliant.
And we understand that. We just want to make sure that if there's that opportunity that they can do that. We're not claiming to be ADA compliant. We're saying that if somebody wanted to get there, they could do that. I know, having worked in parks for years, lots of trails and things like that are not ADA compliant, but you make every effort you can for access. And that's what we're doing.
Even though we just went through an ADA compliance.
Right.
There, you can't do that way anymore. I'll just be honest with you. That's not how we do business on city property. But let me continue. You mentioned that using that dirt access driveway that was put in, the only reason it was put in there was for allowing the put in of the fill. That was there for the trucks.
Right.
And you plan to use that?
We were told by Todd and Brian when we first started this conversation that would be a access point if we needed it.
Okay, but that's right on our parks fields, that we would have a driveway now going into an area where we have young people playing in that ball field and things like that. So would that get fenced or separated?
We hadn't thought about it. We were told it would be an access point.
I'm
So
just asking. It's something that I would think about for the safety of the kids that are playing on those fields and things like that, driving vehicles. So just throwing this out there, especially for Michelle, so she can keep writing her notes. And are you familiar with what that ground is? You know that's road base.
Yep.
That's what it was filled in.
Yeah.
Okay, so road base is what the pool area and everything was done. It
Yeah.
came right off of Crestview.
Yep.
With
And
the
we've
stopover at
looked
Ingles.
at it, and our thoughts were what a great opportunity to show that you can build soil in any condition.
Okay.
And so that's what we're looking to do.
So do you feel there's going to be any drainage issues there? Runoffs?
No, because our irrigation practices will be extremely minimal. We'll use less than a third of what that would be if it was turf. And it's all very directed at plant roots, and so we don't anticipate.
Okay, you don't anticipate it, but have you, when we go do drainage systems, especially in things, we look at retentions, and we are responsible for catching the runoff or any type of water. And what you may think of is that it's only what you're using, but when the rain comes and you have a lot of rain, you're going to have runoff. Now, if you're going to put plants of soil in there and you're going to put mulches in there, if that leaches out and it goes into our drainage system, we may have some NPDES problems. And that's what I'm thinking. This is a whole project because you're moving it from one area where it's small containment into almost an acre. So let me continue on there. This is my thoughts on this thing. And water access there. There's no backflow valve on that. You're going to irrigate land and stuff like that. You should be looking at a backflow valve on
Okay.
that property.
And we've had conversations with Todd towards that, and that's absolutely something that would be done prior to water.
Okay. And then the other thing on that, the former tennis courts, there's no power there.
Right.
Nothing.
Right.
So what do we have for power over there? Nothing?
To the best of my knowledge, there's nothing there.
Nothing. So you're going to be at night?
We don't anticipate of doing a lot of work at night, but it will be fenced, and there's no lights there now. We don't anticipate we'd need lights. I mean, that's
Because there's nothing there. If you're going to put plants and you're going to have little greenhouses and your storage containers, you're making an attractive nuisance, or something attractive for those people to show up. And that's what I'm asking, to look at the whole picture.
We've had conversations about security lighting and things like that. There is lighting on the back of the building, I believe, and that's where we would put storage space. I mean, I guess in our conversations up to this point with staff, there have been lots of discussions about that, and the impression to us was that those were things that would be dealt with when we got to the next step of this. I mean, I don't have an answer to it because we haven't gotten that far.
So no one's wrote out a plan other than your drawing here? Any engineering plan, any drainage plan, or anything like that?
That's as far as we've gotten.
And then I go back to the use of where the trailer was, of the building in the back. And I'm glad it's gone, by the way, too. The greenhouse and demonstration space. And again, I will go back to drainage and the water. It sits high. The lower building sits down by the parking lot. Any runoff
We do
concerns?
get some, yes. And we've done our best to funnel it through the back parking lot and onto Old Hamner Road. So that's what we're getting now, and but we don't anticipate that there'd be any runoff from any activities there that would be carrying anything that would be a water quality issue or anything like that.
Yeah, okay, that's it for now. Thank you.
Catherine?
Yes, thank you. So the MOU first was approved, as I know some of this has been mentioned, but November of 2019. And you used this, so the space was used for 2020 and 2021.
Yes.
So how many courses were offered? I see this calendar of events. Is this similar to what was offered in?
Absolutely not.
How many
No.
courses were offered each year?
All we ran in 2020 was the apprenticeship program. We didn't do anything else. That's 2 evenings a week. There's 9 courses that take 10 months to complete.
Okay. And then in 2021, was it the same?
It was pretty much the same, although we increased it with some other kinds of things like the community gatherings, the potlucks, things like that, and then we added the market in July.
Okay. What has the attendance been at those courses? Like the average number of how was student attendance?
It ranges anywhere from 12 to 18 people.
Okay. And when you talked about on the engagement community page, 28 apprenticeship students, is that the total for the 2 years, or?
Yeah, that's the total for 2 cohorts.
Okay. And then the total for the 2 years that graduated is 8. It's at 8 in 2021, but that's for both years.
No, the second cohort is, they're 8 months into it, so they will finish in
One
April.
cohort has
Yeah.
finished.
Yeah.
Okay. And then as far as the advertising, how are you getting the word out about workshops and the market?
We do flyers. We do a lot of social media outreach. We work with other farm organizations to attract farm, garden, agricultural organizations to try to attract people.
Okay. Have you explored any other sites for the training farm, what you're proposing at the community center, like other nonprofits, churches, private land?
We have not at this point. We like that site because of its closeness to the EAT Center. So if we're in the classroom doing some kind of lesson, it gives us the opportunity to walk across the street and put that theory into practice. So we
Okay.
like the closeness of it.
Okay. And did you consider assuming the increased costs for watering that would happen at these 2 locations?
The MOU states that the city will support us in utilities and water, and we were hoping that would continue. There's certainly the opportunity to discuss taking that on. I think if the city were to convert that to typical parkland, they'd be using about 3.5 times the water we'll use for the farm. So we see it as a conservation practice and not a big hit, but we're open to conversation on that for sure.
Okay. How many vendors have you had each week at the? I saw one of my kids in the video.
It varies significantly. I mean, some weeks we might have 15 vendors. Some weeks we might have 6. It just, we've had a lot of challenges, as Robin pointed out, with vendors, both farmers and craftspeople who maybe saw it as a hobby. Oh, I'm going to do this thing. I've been making these things for a year and now I'm going to sell them. We actually had some vendors who came and sold everything in one night and said it took me 6 months to make this stuff, so I won't be back for half a year. We had a lot of that. And so it was challenging just because we really wanted to keep it as a community market. We could have done outreach. We could have brought farms, and we had farms from as far away as Fresno saying we want to be at your market, but we didn't want that kind of a market. We really wanted to keep it community and local, and so the number of vendors varies based on that kind of an approach.
Okay. And then lastly, when you estimated your number of visitors, is that unique visits or are those some of the repeat visits?
Some of those are repeat visitors, for sure.
Okay, and how are you estimating that number?
Well, are we
counting?
talking about to the market?
Yes.
Or to the market, we try to count how many people we see come in. We count cars in the parking lot. Just try to get an estimate, and that's all we've been able to do. So.
Okay. And then I have a couple questions for you, Michelle, or to Andy. Do we have a process, an internal process at the city level that looks at how we evaluate which nonprofits receive facilities for no fee? Or is that just in the past has been left up to council discretion?
We have special consideration groups, the special consideration groups, but the other nonprofits, they pay, I believe, the fees.
Okay, thank you.
Kevin?
Well, I love the program. I totally support putting it back there temporarily. I get that. I am not as informed as Robin is, so she can ask those intelligent questions, but I'm assuming that you know what you're doing. So if the soil is rocky and crappy, I'm assuming you're going to figure something out. I'm going to assume that you figured out the runoff. I do have a consideration that Ted makes a very good point that how will you protect it? But I'm assuming when it comes to all the farming stuff, you're going to know what you're doing, because otherwise we wouldn't bring you. I like the idea that we're doing something like this in Norco. And ironically, you're putting a garden where there used to be a garden there in the 1930s, right there. And so the kids had a garden, and so I like that. I also have to cut you some slack that you did this during the pandemic. I think too right now what's happening is your comments in terms of people kind of think of it as a hobby, or they've made their thing in 6 months and they sell it all in one night. I think that what's happening is you're going to cull those people out. Personally, I would like to see the things from Fresno. I would like to see, but it's your deal, so I'm going to let you do it. But I'd love that, because I go there and I buy all kinds of stuff I don't need, but I love going there. I mean, the ladies that grow the sprouts, I'm their best customer. But I love what you're doing, and I anticipate that it'll take a couple years to grow, but I'll support it in any way I can. I do trust Robin a lot, though, just so you know. And I think that Ted's comments to creating attractive nuisance give me pause, but I'm just going to trust that you know what you're doing. And the guy back there seems to know what he's doing, so I'll support whatever you need to do. I don't know about Rest Council, but I'm certainly a supporter.
I appreciate
And by the way,
that.
the pictures are great. Where'd you get them?
And I will say that I too trust Robin. I appreciate your comments. I think it's a situation where we obviously need to work closer together, our organization and the city, and we've started that relationship with Michelle, and I think she's held us to task on some things, and we can get caught up. I don't think we're that far behind in terms of getting our farmers in line, getting the craftspeople where they need to be. We put pause on the market for a few weeks to sit down with our vendors. We'll sit down with them all next Thursday night and say, here's where we're at with the city. Here's what we need to do. What's your perspective as vendors? How are you willing to get us where we need to be? So
I have one more question. So subletting, does subletting by definition somebody's paying to be there, or so if you have a meeting room like that, you're not allowed to I just don't
Well,
know.
normally with subletting, you could pay or you could not pay, but the bigger picture for that is insurance purposes.
Got it, yeah, that's what I figured. All right, just a
I-
question.
we worked with the chamber because they have a office in the same building already. We seemed like if they were walking around the corner and sitting at our table, that wasn't a lot different than what they were already doing. If that's an issue, we absolutely will stop.
I've got a couple of questions.
Yes.
So, with all these different counts that you've done, like, as you're saying, like, well, I counted cars in the parking lot, or I counted easy ups, or I counted people coming through, whatever. What reporting requirement do we have that comes back to the city in our agreement?
The only thing that the Amendment 1 states is that his 6-month review comes forward to council, to the city for review. We have nothing. However, buttoning up vendors for the market, in my opinion, would follow with the same processes that we did with the old farmers market at the community center, where each one of the vendors have to sign a contract agreement with the EATS program. They supply their seller's permit, their business license, and we cross-check that with business licensing to make sure everybody's got their paperwork done and in order.
And we haven't been?
No.
Okay.
No.
So we haven't been doing this, and that kind of leads me to the next on, do we have a swap meet permit on file?
I believe there is no swap meet permit on file at this point.
And is there a reason why not?
Oh, we were not required to have one. I met here, planning gave me the list of things I needed to do, and that's what we did.
And would you concur with that, Michelle?
Look at planning.
Pardon? Okay. Vendor seller permits, are we up to speed on all of those?
No, we're not.
Okay.
But we will get there. One of the issues has been that we've asked each vendor to come to the city and fill out their business licensing and that kind of stuff, and we have not had consistency with the vendors to be able to make sure that they've all done that.
So you mentioned earlier about you received approximately $13,000 in grant funding.
Mm-hmm.
What's the total amount of grant funding that you've received?
Currently, we've received somewhere in the range, I'm going to say about $22,000.
And who audits your financials?
That's all done through 5 Keys. Maybe that's a question you can answer. I'm not sure who's doing that.
Those funds that came in.
And is there any reporting on that?
There will be. We haven't spent any of it yet, but we do have reporting requirements for that.
Okay. How much are your vendor fees?
Farmers pay 6% of nightly sales. Craftspeople and artists pay $10 a night, and cottage food businesses pay $20 a night.
Okay. And is there a health department, Michelle, a health department permit on file?
No.
Or is that not required either?
Well, when we talked with the health department, everything they sent us was based on a certified farmers market, which we are not.
Okay.
So,
And then just to wrap up, does 5 Keys have a business license to date?
I do not believe they have one to date now.
we have applied for it. We have not received the approval to pay it yet. Our team in San Francisco has done all of the application work and is just waiting for Renee to call them back to
And
make
when
that
did you do
payment.
the application?
What's that?
When?
Just recently. I'm not sure of the date, but since we've talked with Michelle and she's told us to get one. So.
Okay. That's about all I have. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any cards, anything on this?
I have no speaker cards on this item.
Is there any further discussion? If not, I'll make a recommendation to receive and file.
I have some discussion, if that's okay.
It's okay.
Thanks. So, sorry, let me get to the right page to see where I'm at here. I apologize. Okay, yeah, it's a receive and file. So my question though is, the way I see this report, there's two requests in here. One for use of the community center and one for use of the area behind the Eat Center. So do we just receive and file this and then that will come back for discussion later? Is that the intent? After like some housekeeping things are taken care of?
That is the intent, yes.
Okay,
This
perfect.
This is the 6-month update.
Okay, perfect. I just needed that clarification. Thank you.
I second the receipt. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to add, because in the amendment to the MOU, the report to the City Council, to your question, Greg, should present information on attendance, financial sustainability, community response, vendor participation, any other issues favorable or unfavorable encountered in the operation of the market.
I second the receive and file.
Can I have a discussion real quick? They mentioned a San Francisco office for Eats. I don't see any of that in our memorandum of that address. Can we get that put in there? 5 Keys is different. We should have that. I see a facility, I see an LA address in Los Angeles on the applicant, but I don't see anything in Frisco. Just, if we're gonna do this, we.
Chris, is that the parent address for the 5 Keys?
Okay, I just was asking because I didn't see anything in there, and they're mentioning it. Thank you, that's it.
Is that it?
Please vote. Motion passes unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. Okay, we'll move on to City Council staff and communications. Does city staff have anything to report?
I actually do.
Michelle.
I'm happy to let City Council know that the 4 encampments in the Star River Trails Park is complete and cleaned up. We'll be receiving a report from Echo Bear on the tonnage that they've removed, all the before and after pictures, and their final report.
Good.
I'll share that with Council
Good.
when we receive.
Okay. Chief, I wanted to thank you for last Saturday. Appreciate it. All you guys did. John? Andy? Thank you, Andy. Ted? Robin? Catherine? Okay. Kevin? Thank you all. We're adjourned.